At this time, I'll call our meeting to order. We're excited that everyone is here this evening, and we look forward to the business of our board. At this time, I'd like to recognize Reverend Dr. Bob Kretsu, who's pastor at Hope Mills United Methodist Church, to lead us in our invocation, which will be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance. If you will, all please rise.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to share from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 21. Whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what he has done has been done before God. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together to be about the business of our community. We thank you for our mayor and for our commissioners, for our town administrators. We pray blessings on them and strength and wisdom. And Lord, we pray that you would continue to bless our town of Hope Mills, North Carolina. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we do have one addition to our agenda, and that would be under the consent agenda. It would be a consideration of authorization to receive $13,100 reimbursement from an interlocal agreement for mosquito abatement services through the state of North Carolina, Cumberland County. So that would be added to our consent agenda. Is there any other additions or deletions to our agenda?
Motion to approve, Madam Mayor.
I have a motion to approve. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none, approve. At this time, I have the honor of introducing to you a group of young men and women that I'm very proud to say this is our first meeting. It's our organizational meeting. We would have met, we kind of did everything tonight quickly because we were supposed to meet in November, and we had to move it to this evening. And then we had to move it to out here because our committee room was being used. So just know that they get to be out front and center this evening, but this is the mayor's leadership committee. We're very fortunate. We have 3 representatives from each high school, Jack Britt, Southview, and Grace Creek. We've elected our officers this evening. We also are very fortunate tonight. We have their leaders here, which I'm going to let them introduce their sponsors to you. But I'm going to start off by, we have a officer from each school. So that's in no particular rank or filing. They had to decide among themselves who was going to be the leader of their group, and they did an outstanding job, as leaders do. So I'd like first to introduce to you Ashlyn Burgos, and she's our chairman this year. She's a senior, and I'll turn it over to her to introduce her school representatives.
Hi, my name is Ashlyn Burgos. I'm a senior at Grace Creek High School, like she said, and I'm also student body president there. And I would like to introduce Emily Gonzalez and Kayla Mady. Emily is our junior class president, and Kayla Mady is our student body historian. And then our advisor, our wonderful, lovely advisor, I love her so much, is Leanna Bear. Say hi, Ms. Ridge. And yeah, we're from Grace Creek. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our vice chairman is from Jack Britt High School, and her name is Melissa Chu. And I'll let her introduce her school and tell us a little bit about.
Hello, I'm Melissa Chewy, by the way.
Okay.
Just a little.
Okay.
I've been doing SGA for a very long time, and I participate in the Student Voices Council with the superintendent as well. So I'm very dedicated to external influences. I'd like to introduce 2 of my fellow students, Ethan Finney and Kiara Ramos. They are both very outstanding students, and they both participate in SGA and extracurricular activities. And I'd like to mention also that Ethan Finney is running for Central District Chairman this year, so I'd like to congratulate him on that. And yeah, thank you.
And your sponsor is?
Miss Erin Guzman. She is not available tonight.
Okay, thank you. And our secretary is from Southview High School, and his name is William Pryor.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us. I'm William Pryor. I'm a junior, and I'm my school's student body vice president at Southview High School. I'm personally a part of the International Baccalaureate program. I'm also part of my school's National Honor Society, and I'm also part of the school basketball team. I'd like to introduce my fellow students, Nadia Carter. She's a senior, and she's our student body vice president, and she's a part of National Honor Society. Morgan Evans, our student body treasurer, she's also a senior, and she's a part of the women's soccer team, and she's also a part of National Honor Society. And then our advisor, the marvelous Miss Sharon Payne. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. And just so you know, they meet monthly, and this year what we're going to tackle is our historical properties in Hope Mills and the historical district. We found that we need our young people to know a little bit more about history in Hope Mills, and one way we're going to do that is start working toward those areas that not only do we want to clean up and make more presentable, but we want people to know more about why it's important that we save them. So I'm very excited to work with you this year, and especially want the sponsors to know how important we feel that you are. Everything that we do as far as the communication, it goes through the sponsors so that their parents will know, and then we do everything we can so that they will have a good experience here at Town Hall. So thank you very much, and looking forward to working with all of you. Next, I have a special presentation. And I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and the board if they will step down in front. I will read this, and then I will hand this down for them to make the presentation. So if the board will step right down in front, that way you can make the presentation. I think it's only appropriate that we make this as special as we can. Our proclamation reads, whereas Jim James L.B. Clarke, a native of Waterloo, New York, and longtime Hope Mills resident, died October 5th at age 82, and whereas he dedicated his life to this community and his family and demonstrated his service to the town of Hope Mills through his involvement in the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Hope Mills Veterans Affairs Commission, and other organizations, and whereas throughout his life his military service was never far from his mind, and he worked to bring a traveling replica of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to Hope Mills in 2004, and was also instrumental in establishing the Veterans Memorial Park along Rockfish Road in Hope Mills. And whereas it is the desire of this community to show appreciation and express our love to his family and our support during this time, now therefore I, Jackie Warner, Mayor, do hereby proclaim on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and the town of Hope Mills our sincerest appreciation and gratitude to the family of Jim Clarke for his contributions to the town. And at this time I'd like Ms. Jean Clarke to come up and let our board present this special proclamation to you, and thank you so much for every night that you attend our board meetings.
No crime, Miss Jean.
You can cry, Miss Jean.
There's a special lady right here. She also recruited me to get involved with the Chamber of Commerce and started attending these meetings back in about 12 years ago. She's always been very involved.
There we go.
I'd like everybody to know that for 50 years, this lady and her husband was part of the Veterans Foreign Wars of this state. She's a past state auxiliary president, not the same year that I was a state commander, but we both served at the highest level of the VFW in our state at different times. And her husband, Jim, was instrumental so much into taking care of veterans in our community. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much.
I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. What a wonderful surprise. And I know Jim is probably turning over right now. He probably is.
And she's our candy lady. She comes every day to see candy. So you kids know that if you see her, she's always got a bag of candy.
See, that's a long story, because I used to really be a part of Hershey Candy Company many years ago, and I just got into this candy thing. So now they all put up with candy. Thank you so much. Thank you.
At this time, we have a special presentation from Davenport and Company regarding a bond referendum and issuance process. I'll turn it over to Mr. Holland, and we'll let you take it from there.
Okay, that's hard to follow up. Good evening. We've been talking about a lot of projects that the town has, and every so often the word bonds is brought up. And we've never issued bonds here at Hope Mills before, so I thought it'd be good if we had, we've got Ted Cole here tonight from Davenport and Company, and their group that helps municipalities walk through the process of issuing bond ratings and also going through a bond referendum process. So I thought it'd be a good idea to have Ted come and explain to all of us the process and what it takes in order to issue bond ratings, and also what is entailed in bond referendum process. So, Ted, if you'll come on.
All right. Good evening. Again, my name's Ted Cole with Davenport and Company. And as Drew said, just wanted to share some information with you all tonight. No, certainly not looking for any action. Hopefully it'll give you a little bit of perspective on what the process might be should you decide you want to move forward with capital projects that involve debt. I believe you all have a copy of this presentation in your packet. There's a lot of information. I know you've got a long agenda, so I'm going to work through it quickly. If you want me to slow down a little bit or you have questions, please stop me along the way. And let me just say, while the town has not issued general obligation bonds in the recent past, maybe you never have, you have issued debt before for certain capital projects, rolling stock vehicles, police, fire, dam repairs, things of that nature. And so general obligation bonds are just another type of debt that you could consider issuing in the future if you so choose. There are other ways to issue debt that are not general obligation bonds. They're called installment financings in North Carolina. There's a different process to issue those, a little bit of different considerations from interest rates and such. And we'll touch on both of those as I go through this presentation. There are page numbers in the lower right corner. And we've broken this down into 4 major categories in terms of a process. A capital planning process, which you may well do every year as part of your budgeting process. Following that, some sort of a determination to move forward with a project or multiple projects. So a consensus amongst council that, hey, these are things that are a priority to us and we'd like to pursue them. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to issue debt. You might be able to fund them with cash or reserves, but debt is another tool that you could use to help fund a project. So a determination to move forward. And then a general obligation bond referendum. Again, you don't have, if you need to do debt for a project, meaning you don't want to use all cash or the dollars or such that you can't use cash, you need to do some debt. GO is one option, general obligation, but there are other options for debt that I'll touch on. And then finally, if you were to move forward with a referendum and it were approved by the voters, then we'll touch on briefly the process to go forward and issue that debt. All right, so first on the capital planning, and I'm not going to talk through every slide. I'm going to try to hit the highlights here. But it's really a fine-tuning of a plan, and as I said, it may be something that you all do every year as part of your capital or your budget, rather a listing of projects, a prioritization. Usually it encompasses what are the estimated costs of those projects, what is the timing of those projects, typically by fiscal year. Many localities look at a 5-year CIP, capital improvement plan, or a 10-year CIP. And when we start talking about a potential general obligation bond, one of the earlier steps that we might recommend is to do an internal review of your credit, your historical cash flows as a town, certain ratios, and do an internal assessment to determine if we needed to get a bond rating or a credit rating in place, what's the reasonable range of where we believe that credit rating would land. And that will have a impact on the borrowing rate ultimately that you would achieve if you move forward. Two basic concepts when we talk about debt. Debt capacity, in other words, your ability as a town to take on debt for whatever the project might be, and be able to demonstrate you can do so in a responsible fashion and still maintaining a strong financial profile. And there are usually 3 to 4 different debt ratios that we look at in order to determine, do you have the capacity to go out and issue debt and be well received by the market? And then there's debt affordability. They're related, but they're different. So you might have the capacity under those fairly specific measures, but it's another question about how affordable is it? Where are the dollars going to come from in your budget to repay the new debt service associated with that debt? So debt capacity and debt affordability are two important concepts that we look at. And then ultimately kind of marrying up that capital improvement plan with those debt capacity and debt affordability. In other words, you've got a list of needs or wants, kind of depends on how you approach it, and then you've got a sense of how much debt, if we need to issue debt, can we take on over the next several years, and how are we going to repay it? And a little bit of work on the front end to see how well those are lined up. Are your needs and wants greater than your capacity or your affordability, or are they well matched? And if the needs and wants are greater, then I think you go through a process of prioritization and making some decisions. Along the way, the last bullet point, you may want to consider adopting some policies related to debt. That can be helpful in sort of establishing some guidelines for what you as a board are comfortable taking on, and it gives you and your staff a little bit of guidance on the planning process. As it relates to a bond rating or a credit rating, I'm on the left-hand side. The town is not rated, and that doesn't mean you're not creditworthy. You just have not needed a rating. Many localities in North Carolina are not rated because they've never had to be. Generally speaking, there's 3 rating agencies: Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. The best rating that any local government can achieve is AAA. And then you go down the rating scale into the AA category, the single A category, and so on. Most all of the North Carolina cities and towns that are rated are in the single A category or higher. And we have no expectation to believe that you would be any lower than a single A category. In fact, you may be sort of in the strong single A or even into the AA category. But time will tell, 1, whether that's necessary, and 2, what the results of that might be. At a very high level on the right are some methodologies that the rating agencies apply to rating local governments. Generally speaking, they look at a handful of different focus areas. The economy and the tax base, that's roughly 30% of the rating. Your finances are 30%, and when we talk about finances, it's things like fund balance trends. Have you been adding to your fund balance over the last several years? Have you been reducing your fund balance? Your budget to actual results, are you outperforming budget or are you underperforming budget? Management is give or take 20%. And debt and pension liabilities are 20%. Moody's and S&P get there a little bit differently, but they kind of come full circle, and it's a very similar approach. And you'll also notice with those check marks, some of these credit considerations you all as a governing body and your staff can control year over year, let's say through the budget process, how you might want to add to fund balance, how you might draw down fund balance, the issuance of debt. So we call those, you have some short-term control over those. Others are things that you don't have quite as much control over. So the economy and the tax base, how is assessed values growing, jobs, wealth levels in the town, things of that nature. So it's a blend of things that you have more control over, but also some things that you have less control over and that take a little bit longer to evolve through various policy decisions you might make. Okay? Just for perspective, this is data on page 5 that we pull from the Moody's rating agency, and we have broken it into 3 basic categories: AAA, AA, and single A. And when you look at it, we have not included counties here because cities and towns are fundamentally different than counties. For Moody's across the country, they have about 226 different cities or towns that are rated AAA, almost 1,600 that are AA, and a little over 700 that are single A. And then we drill down specifically to North Carolina. Moody's has 12 different cities or towns that are AAA, almost 30 that are AA, and 4 that are single A. And so I think very preliminarily, as we've looked at certain things from your financials, we see you all falling in that AA range, and that would just evolve again when and if the time comes that that's something that you might want to pursue. Okay. The next, I'm going to skip over this page. It basically is just helping to understand the correlation between a higher credit rating and a lower cost of borrowing. It kind of makes common sense. The better your credit is, the lower your cost of borrowing will be, which means you have greater debt affordability because your interest rates are lower. So it's an important concept, and even if you're just going to a bank to borrow money, while you may not need a specific bond rating, the bank's going to do their own credit work and their own assessment, and they're going to look at many of the same things that a rating agency might look at. So no matter what your ultimate approach is for debt, to go to the bond market or to go to banks, very similar process is going on in terms of assessing your credit, and the better you can demonstrate your strengths, the better the interest rate will be, the better your reception will be, and all things being equal, the more affordable the debt will be if you choose that. A couple of pages on 7, I'll really look at page 8. This is really looking, as much as anything for ourselves, looking at the last 4 years from your audit. And if you look at the right-hand side of page 8, what we're tracking for you is the trend for your fund balance. And the rating agencies look at that either as your fund balance as a percent of your revenues or your expenditures, or as a percent of your budget. You see you've generally been on an upward slope. You've been adding to fund balance over these 4-year periods, so that's obviously a positive trend. When I talked earlier about the rating criteria and finances, not only are they looking at it, where are your reserves today, but how have they evolved over the last 4 or 5 years, and this would line up very nicely. Not only are you at a very good level as a percent of your budget, almost 60% when you look at your unassigned fund balance, which is that category of fund balance that has the least amount of restrictions on it, and you've been adding to it every year. And if not already, it might be something worth considering going forward to establish a policy related to a fund balance level as a minimum, so that again, when you're looking at your capital program, and you say, look, we want to find a nice balance between funding capital projects with cash, maybe using some debt. You've got a little bit of guidance there that you don't want to see that cash level fall below some minimum level, and that might be worth consideration. a lot of information on this page 9. What I would draw your attention to is the bottom 3 charts. Hope Mill is in gold, that bars that are in gold. The cities and towns nationally that are rated AAA, AA, and single A are in light green, and the North Carolina cities and towns are in dark green. And across those 3 charts, the further off to the right you are, the better. And what we're measuring there is different fund balance levels as a percent of your budget. So higher is generally better, means you have better liquidity, and you'll see that you are outperforming all 6 of those other categories. Those other green bars are the median measurement for any of those groups. And so you're better than the median. Doesn't mean you're better than everybody in that group, but you compare very favorably. So just a quick little snapshot and insight to how a rating analyst would look at your liquidity position. And again, not only have you been growing your reserves, like we talked about a moment ago, based on FY17 audit, because that's the most recent audit that everybody has submitted, you compare very favorably on your liquidity or cash. Talk for a moment about your existing debt, tax-supported debt. The only other type of debt you have is, I believe, stormwater debt. So I'm not talking about that here. This is just tax-supported debt. You've got about $5 million of debt outstanding. The details of that are in the appendix. And again, it's been issued over time, primarily issuing debt directly to banks for a dam project, vehicles, police and fire equipment, things of that nature. It's all relatively short-term debt. Everything you have on the books today is paid off by fiscal year 25, and you can see year over year your annual payment is stepping down. So certainly when we look at that debt profile, it would not appear that you have overused debt historically, and you've used it pretty conservatively. In other words, you haven't issued a tremendous amount of debt, and what debt you have issued has generally been pretty short-term in nature. Okay, and that's a positive. We've got 3 pages of debt ratios, and what I will just quickly tell you, and I'm happy to go back on these, but in the interest of time, I want to make sure we get to some of the more relevant topics. Your 3 debt ratios compare pretty favorably. On page 11, this is a measurement of how rapidly you're paying your debt back. And so you want to be further out towards the right in that chart in the upper right corner. You're in gold. You are further out to the right. That's a positive for that ratio. Page 12, this is debt as a percent of your tax base. Generally speaking, lower is better. And you can see your own chart on the left, or in the comparison in the upper right, you are on the lower end. You want to be further to the left on that chart, and you are. So again, that's a positive ratio as it relates to your debt profile. And then finally, debt service, that is your annual payment as a percent of the budget. Generally, you want to be lower, further to the left on that chart in the upper right corner. You're below the median of most all of those other categories except for the A-rated, but you're only at about 7% on that ratio. Lower is better, and this looks pretty good. So when we've just taken a very quick look, just sourcing your audits between your reserves and your fund balance and what those have done over the years and how you've used debt and some very specific debt ratios, you have a strong financial profile in that regard. And what I would tell you is the town has debt capacity. Under any of these debt measures, if you were to take on more debt for whatever reason it might be, I think you can do so without, of course there are limitations to it, but you certainly have the capacity to be considering some amount of debt, new debt going forward for capital. Really, I think the question will be the affordability. How is it that you'll adjust the budget to account for that new payment, if that's what you decide you would like to do? So let me just quickly show you page 14. This is an example. What this is simply trying to demonstrate for you all as you work from left to right is you have annual payments for that debt today, and we know exactly what those are. They're not going to change unless you choose to refund the debt or pay it off. And working with staff, we've identified that your debt budgeting practice is just simply making a general fund appropriation to pay that debt from current year revenues. And as that debt pays off, if you were to continue to appropriate the same amount of money every year in your budget towards debt service, as the actual payments go down, if you were to flat fund your appropriation for debt service, you start to have some dollars that could be reallocated to your capital program. So it's just another budgeting tool as you're working on your CIP. Because your debt is stepping down every year and it's paid off by 2025, you'll see it under column K on this page 14. If you were to continue budgeting the current amount going forward, you start to have some dollars that can be reallocated to capital projects if that's what you choose to do. You could reallocate them to the operating budget if that were a need or a desire, but it might be a good tool to try to keep those dollars in the capital program so that when and if you need to fund additional projects, you've got some dollars available to do that without having to find additional or new revenues. So that kind of wraps up the capital planning. In other words, we've kind of assessed ourselves, where are we on our credit, our key ratios and trends, and what kind of debt capacity and debt affordability do we have, or at least setting up a process to measure those. Now what we're talking about is phase 2, which is the determination to proceed with projects. And again, this may just simply be a continuation of your capital budgeting process that might already be unfolding, or something that you do every year. And particularly when we start talking about a general obligation bond referendum, which is a town-wide vote for the approval of issuing debt. You can look at those in very broad categories like parks and rec or streets and sidewalks, or you can look at those more specifically, a specific project that you might want to consider, like a recreation center or a particular street project. These are just examples. There's nothing in here that is specific to the analysis. So as you're moving forward with that capital program, either looking at broader categories or very specific projects year by year, and really drilling down to what are the estimated amounts for any of those projects, dollar amounts, and the timing, right? And we look at everything on a fiscal year basis, and the impact of issuing debt and repaying that debt will vary depending upon which fiscal year it is that you do that. It's sort of common sense, but that's an important part of the planning project, and the determination is trying to get a good handle on project amounts and timing, and then marrying that up with the debt capacity and debt affordability process that I just described, and start to really put what we kind of call a plan of finance together. So if we have these 5 projects with these amounts and this timing, what does it look like if we fund those projects over the next 3 or 4 years, whatever the case may be, using cash and or debt, and we start to create this plan of finance so that you all have the information you need to start to make some decisions about how it impacts your budget. Is it something we have to deal with in the next budget, or do we have a few years to build up to a place where we can comfortably move forward with those projects? All right. Credit options, I alluded to this earlier. I'm on page 17. We have identified 4 basic debt vehicles that are at your disposal as a North Carolina town. General obligation bonds, they're called GO bonds for short. The people that own those bonds or buy those bonds are buying your best credit, any local government's best credit, because it essentially says what's backing that debt is our full faith and credit, our taxing authority. And so if you are, for some reason, having budget difficulty, if you have issued general obligation bonds, you are compelled legally to raise taxes to repay that debt. And that's what your full faith and credit is. The GO bonds are what require a town-wide referendum to be passed in order to issue the GO bonds. It's the best type of debt any local government can issue. The second category is what we call installment purchase contracts, or limited obligation bonds, or certificates of participation. We kind of use those terms interchangeably, and at the end of the day, they are basically obligations of the town, debt, but they're secured by some asset. So it's like a mortgage on a facility or on a piece of equipment, what have you. You don't have to have a referendum in order to issue that type of debt. You have to hold a public hearing. You've done that before. And so it's a little bit of an easier path to issue that debt. All things being equal, that debt is not as secure to a lender as the GO bonds. It's not as strong a credit because it's subject to annual appropriation as part of the budget. And all things being equal, you probably pay a slightly higher interest rate for that type of debt than you would for a general obligation bond. Thirdly, there's a type of debt called revenue bonds that's typically used for utility purposes where you're pledging, let's say, water and sewer revenues or electric revenues. May not be applicable for you all depending on your utility systems, but it is a type of debt that does not require a referendum, does require a public hearing, but unlike the installment secured by your asset that you're funding, maybe this building, whereas a revenue bond is secured by a pledge of very specific revenues, typically a utility system revenue. And then lastly, something called special obligation bonds, which as a town in North Carolina is an option for you all, where you're actually, it's probably of the three the least commonly used. There are some limitations on the type of projects you can fund with these special obligation bonds. Statutes dictate that. And you'll see at the very bottom of this page, the security for that type of debt might be, as an example, a pledge of your sales tax or your use tax, franchise tax, tipping fees, solid waste fees, and what we call other non-tax revenues. So with sales tax, yes, it's a tax, but it's a tax that's levied by either the county or the state, and it's distributed to the town. It is not a tax of the town directly, so it is a way you can pledge sales tax, but the subtlety there is it's not your tax. You get the distribution of the revenue, but it is levied by somebody else. So of all of these, general obligation bonds provide you with your best credit, all things being equal, a lower interest rate, but it is the one that requires the referendum, and we're going to talk a little bit about that process. Good segue there to page 19. One of the things that we would recommend you do, should you desire to pursue a referendum, is you engage the services of a bond counsel. That is a specialized type of attorney that focuses on local government debt and in particular on the front end of a referendum can help you all navigate all the steps you have to take in order to get a referendum on the ballot and the various legal steps required to do that in compliance with statutes. And then they would also assist you with elements of issuing that debt if the referendum is approved. Under North Carolina general statutes, you can only hold a general obligation bond referendum during a town-wide election, right? So everybody's got to have an opportunity to vote. From start to finish, it's about a 6-month process to go to referendum, right? So you identify when is the next election, town-wide election that we would want to do this on, and then you've more or less back up 6 months from then to get this process started. If you have a referendum and it's approved, you then have 7 years to issue the debt. So let's just say, hypothetically, you voted $10 million of GO bonds and they were approved. You would have 7 years to issue that debt before the authorization would expire. And you have an ability to go to the local government commission in Raleigh and request an extension for another 3 years. They don't have to grant it, they typically do. So an initial 7-year period with the ability potentially to extend it to a total of 10 years from the date of the referendum. And if you, in my example, if the voters approve 10 million, you don't have to issue all of that at one time. You can break it up into pieces, again, provided that you do so and you issue that debt within 7 or 10 years. If you don't hit that mark, the authorization would just expire and you would have never acted on it. And that happens from time to time. Things change, priorities change, finances change, and authorizations sometimes expire because a project is no longer a priority or you're just not comfortable moving forward with debt. Okay? So that's a little bit about the timing. I'm not going to go through every item on page 20, but this basically lays out that 6-month process. And you kind of work backwards. You identify the referendum, or excuse me, the election date that you believe lines up well, and then you work backwards from there, and you'll see there are a number of very specific steps that involve the local government commission in Raleigh, that involve the Board of Elections and other things. So I won't go through all of that, but state statutes are fairly specific. LGC considerations. I think we've got a couple of pages on LGC considerations on pages 21 and 22. The long and short of it is they like to be involved in the process early on so they know what your plans are. And they're generally looking, I'm talking off of the top of 21, that they can make certain findings in conjunction with your request to have a referendum. That the bond issue would be necessary and expedient, that the amount is adequate for your projects but not excessive, that the unit, that's you, the town in this case, that your debt management procedures and policies are good, and that they generally have a reasonable assurance that the amount of debt that you want to vote can be managed within your finances. That if there is a requirement or a need to raise taxes to repay the debt, that it is not excessive. And that can be somewhat subjective, but they really take their lead from you all in that planning process. You know, if you say, look, if we were to do this and we space this GO bond out over 4, 5, 7 years, we believe it might require the equivalent of 2 pennies on the tax rate, just as an example. That would be part of the LGC's consideration, that a tax increase to support that debt is not excessive. And then lastly, that the bonds can be marketed at reasonable rates of interest. All right, and they like to look at a number of other things. As I said, there would typically be a meeting with the local government commission staff 2 to 3 months prior to when you would want their approval to hold the referendum, and so that at that meeting you're talking about your plans. Ideally, you're talking about the planning work that you did to get to that point, and you're giving them the information they need to be comfortable putting it on their agenda for the actual commission, the local government commission itself, to approve. And if they approve your application, then you can move forward and actually have the referendum or put the bond on the ballot. Okay? So they are very much involved on the front end for a general obligation bond referendum. There's an application that they require. That's on page 22. I'm not going to dig into that just yet. We've shown you on 23 a sample ballot. You know, there may be a number of things on the election that you might choose. People running for office, what have you. If it's a countywide election or a state election, there'll be a number of other things on the ballot, but this just gives you an idea graphically, as well as some of the bullet points on the left about what are required. And generally speaking, what we see more times than not is that the questions on the ballot related to the bonds are usually written more broadly. Streets and sidewalks, parks and rec, community facilities. Nothing to preclude you from being very specific, but if that's approved, it limits you to the scope of the project, whereas streets and sidewalks, you've got a little bit of latitude to find or fit projects within that broader category as opposed to, South Main Street project. But that is completely a local decision about how broad or how specific you might want to be in the question for the voters. Okay? Some local governments will choose to provide education materials for their citizens so that they understand the process that you went through to get something on the ballot, the planning work. As you're probably very well aware, as a governing body, you can't use public funds to endorse a bond referendum, but you certainly can to educate the voters. And then oftentimes you'll see community groups that might get behind a certain effort and do more of the community outreach and education in an effort to either educate or create interest or support for or against, I suppose, a particular bond measure. All right, and then lastly, issuance of debt. I'll be brief here as well, or as brief as I can be. Assuming that there is a referendum, then you will go about the process of determining, all right, are we ready to actually issue this debt? If you remember, you have 7 years to do it. You could get it extended for another 3 if need be. And this is, I think, where you continue to fine-tune that planning process, the amounts and the timing for your projects, the coordination with the local government commission. Generally speaking, what drives the issuance schedule is the local government commission likes to know that for whatever project you're pursuing, you have bids and permits in hand for that project, so that when you go to them to issue debt, they know that the amount of debt you're issuing is adequate for your project but not excessive. And the way they do that is you say, well, look, we got a bid in hand, therefore we know exactly how much debt we need to issue. We're not going to issue too much or too little. And major permits, whether they're from, NCDOT or Department of Insurance or DENR, whatever it is, they like those to be in hand because that's one of those things that can, really derail a project or delay a project, and they don't want local governments in a position of having borrowed money for something only to sit on it for indefinitely while permits are worked through. So bids and permits are the really key drivers to the actual timing of issuing the debt if you get to that point. And then you will see, as we go through the next several pages, you've got the ability to determine, is this debt something we want to place with a bank? Is this debt something we want to sell to the quote-unquote bond market? Because you don't have a bond rating today, and remember, we touched on that in the very beginning, not because you're not credit worthy, you just have not established one. Because you don't have a bond rating, the way state statutes are interpreted is you actually have a little more latitude to, if you have a GO bond that's approved, you can actually go and place that with a bank, or you can choose to establish a bond rating and sell those bonds into the bond market. That will be a decision at that time. I don't think you would need to decide that on the front end. We've listed pros and cons. Generally speaking, when you go to banks, the term of the debt is shorter, maybe out to 15 years. Every so often, you'll see banks that'll go a little bit longer. The public bond market can go longer with fixed rates. Generally, we're talking about fixed rates for local government debt as opposed to variable rates, particularly in what we believe is a rising rate environment. The prep work to get ready for a bank loan versus a bond is different. The costs are different. But that dynamic changes not all the time, but regularly. So what's our best route to issue this debt when we look at interest rates, the term of the debt, and the other terms and conditions. And that's something you would assess a little bit further down the road, again, when you get to the point that you've decided this is something you'd like to pursue. And we've got a couple of slides on an example of what a bank loan looks like from a schedule perspective on page 29, and we also have an example of what a public bond issue schedule looks like on page 32, and that really wraps it up. You know, it's a process, as I said. General obligation bonds, you know, in this most recent election, there were several of them in North Carolina for local governments in North Carolina. It is, you know, obviously an opportunity to poll your citizenry to see the public sentiment behind it. But you have options to issue debt if you need to issue debt that don't include a bond referendum. Where you get into some difficulty, it's one thing to build a building like this and use it as collateral. Lenders like that. It's a tangible asset. It's a very essential facility. But when you start talking about parks and rec and streets and sidewalks, those projects don't lend themselves real well to serve as collateral for a loan. You know, what are you going to pledge? Is it a greenway? Are you going to pledge a street? Can you even pledge a street? And so for that reason, GO bonds can be very helpful, because remember, you're not pledging an asset to the holder of a general obligation bond. They don't have an asset. What they have is your full faith and credit, your legal obligation to pay the debt, and if you can't, you have to raise taxes. Statutes require that, the local government requires that, and for that reason, GO bonds can create more flexibility to finance projects that otherwise would be hard to finance because they don't serve as collateral very well. Let me stop there, and you know, you may have questions. You may just need time to digest this, and certainly we can circle back on this conversation at a later date, you know, after you've had time to review it.
I'd first like to thank you, because I think not only is this good information, but I think it's answered a lot of questions that we didn't have, and I'm sure this is something that, along with our finance director and our finance committee, is something we need to probably, like you said, digest a little more. But at this time, if there's any questions or any responses from any of our board members, I'll open it up for that.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir?
thank you for a very informative presentation.
Thank you.
And the other thing that I would say is thanks for the additional comments of recommendations that you embedded throughout the presentation. That's helpful too.
Good.
Not only for us, but will be for Drew as we go forward.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir?
I would also like to thank you for the presentation.
Sir.
It was very informative. This is obviously too much to comprehend in one night, and Drew, I don't know how you guys do it, but I'm sure to come in handy later as we move on down the road. Thank you again. Have a nice Christmas.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you all
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. So you've got your books. Hope you took good notes and you study, because in 2 weeks we'll have a test. No. But you can see throughout his presentation, what I've done since I've been here the last several years is we have a CIP now, capital improvements program that we've set up to prioritize projects and move forward. We've also, in the last several budgets, I don't know if you've noticed, we haven't included a lot of new debt to prepare us in the future for capital purchases such as the public safety facility, and we have started the rotation of the fire trucks and police vehicles and those sorts of things, so it doesn't add significant to the debt, so we can control it in the future and do better planning. So we're on the path of a lot of the things that he's mentioned in here, and hopefully as we go forward in planning, this will come in handy for us.
And I want to personally thank you for the board, because as you look from 2014 to today's audit, that financially Hope Mills is not only sound, but we also are doing, as by his rating, just by his verbal a confirmation we're doing well. So I appreciate everything you do and our town manager does, because I believe, along with our retreats and our budgeting process, I think that we're on the right track, and we just have to continue this as we move forward. So thank you, sir. Thank
All
you
right,
for
thank
everything
you.
you do. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is a special presentation, and I'll turn it over to our town manager, Ms. Adams, to take
Thank you.
care of that for me.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Board of Commissioners. In your packet is just a little brief statement concerning the American Council of Engineering Companies of North Carolina. The town of Hope Mills was notified in October that the town and Schnabel Engineering had been selected to receive the ACEC North Carolina 2019 Honors Award for Engineering Excellence, Water Resources for the Hope Mills Lake Dam Rehabilitation Project. So there's a board over there that I'll draw attention to. And present this to you. So this is just another proud moment for the dam. Beautiful. Yeah. All right. And everybody's welcome to look at that poster board.
Thank you so much. All right, next thing on our agenda is public hearings. And the first public hearing is on proposed annexation. The total acreage is 2.08 acres and is owned by Carol Riddle LLC, Post Office Box 53, 729 Fayetteville. The board adopted resolution number 2018-18, directing the clerk to investigate at the October 22nd, 2018 regular meeting. The certificate of sufficiency has been completed, and a notice of public hearing was published on November 21st. And then after the public hearing, the board can make a decision. So I'll turn it over to Mr. McLaughlin to give us some information.
And as I have the next 5 presentations, I'll just pull up a lawn chair.
Stay right here with us.
And as you stated, this is the annexation for Chick-fil-A. What you also will see on the agenda later down is the initial zoning. We actually crafted that with the developer and the county staff to kind of fast track this in. But what you have before you this evening is the annexation portion. In your packets, you do see, I put a little map together that gives you a visual of the fact that the piece that we're proposing is in the county, it's in the town MIA, and it's landlocked behind 3101 North Main Street. You also have the memo in your packets that we've started doing with annexations from the entire plan review staff, police chief, stormwater administrator, floodplain manager, public works director, myself, fire chief, and the chief building inspector, and we'll all recommend approval of this request.
Okay. At this time, we'll open up the floor for our hearing. And anyone that's here would like to speak in favor of this, if you'd come to the microphone at this time, identifying yourself and giving your name and address so that our clerk can take that information down. So the microphone is open for anyone that would like to speak in favor of this project.
Thank you, Board of Commissioners, our town board. And my name is Joe Riddle. I reside in Fayetteville at 125 Great Oaks. And I'm speaking for the Carolyn Riddle annexation. Just like to say that we were able to put these 2 pieces of property together. The one on the front was already in the city and was zoned properly for commercial. The larger piece in the back joins it. It doesn't have access, but by merging them, they'll both have access. And we were hoping they would both be in Hope Mills, of course, and that they would receive favorable zoning. I have been fortunate to work with Chick-fil-A on all of the Chick-fil-A's in Cumberland County, with the exception of the one at the mall. And the most recent development was the one on Rayford Road. All I can say is they're a great company. They do a great job without towns forcing them to do a great job on their landscaping and their structure. The one on Rayford Road, I worked on that for a real long time on a couple locations, and it ended up falling at Purdue Drive. And I'll just tell you this, they do such a good job that that a lot of other restaurants and retailers follow them. And they look to see how well Chick-fil-A does in a market. You know, even though we kind of call it fast food, it's definitely upgraded fast food. At least I think that. I know my daughter wants it about 3 or 4 times a week. So, but the best thing about Chick-fil-A in your market is that other higher end type restaurants and higher end type retailers really look at them, and if they do well, they come behind them. And on Rayford Road, I actually did the Panera work on Ramsey, built that store, and I knew that they wanted to go to Rayford Road because that Chick-fil-A did so well. They did lock down a site. They're going to, I think they're going to tear down a building that's over in front of Steinmart and put a Panera there. So that's a perfect example of you know, a nice restaurant following another one. So sure hope you all see this favorable, and look forward to working with the town. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this? If not, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to this? If not, do I have a motion to close public hearing?
Motion to close.
Thank you so much. And now at this time, board, you have any questions for Mr. McLaughlin, or any questions in reference to this project?
Madam Mayor, make a motion that we adopt the annexation ordinance 2018-02.
Okay, we have a motion that we adopt this ordinance. Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Thank you, sir. Welcome to Hope Mills. The next public hearing is rezoning of 2.68 plus or minus acres from R6 residential, O&I office and institutional, CI planned local business district to CI planned local business district, CZ conditional zonings for convenience retail with gasoline sales and other specific requested allowed uses, or to a more restrictive zoning district located at the northwest quadrant of the intersection of Service Road 1112, Rockfish Road, and Bullard Street, south of North Carolina 59, North Main Street. And this is submitted by Barry and Mary Clemente, Carl Edwin West, Paul and Patsy Dialp, Sorterio Francos, and Andy Parolio on behalf of Circle K owners. I turn it back over to Mr. McLaughlin.
And as stated before, this is case P1836. As you can see on the existing zoning map, the subject properties are outlined in yellow. This is an assemblage of about 6 parcels. As you can see, the zoning that there's this area of Main Street is in a very well-established commercial corridor. There are residential uses in the area, but the gist of this entire area is considered to be a commercial corridor. This assemblage is located at the corner of North Main and Rockfish Road. The next map you see are land uses, and as there are a variety of zoning classifications in the area, you also have a variety of land uses from restaurants, salons, apartments, pawn shops, and things of that nature. This is an aerial photograph showing the subject property in white. These are existing soils, subject properties highlighted in red. As you can see, water and sewer is available on North Main Street in the front and Bullitt Street to the rear. And this is the proposed site plan. When I get further into this presentation, I'll pull this site plan back up, so as I talk about the proposal, you can kind of look back at it. These are your site photographs. This is a view of one of the residential properties that are part of this assemblage. This is another residential property. As you may not know, I put it in my packet. During budget season, we approved a demolition program, and part of that demolition program was for us to identify dilapidated houses that we would possibly offer for demolition, and we'd provide some incentives. Several of the houses that are included in this proposal were on that demolition list. So I just wanted to make it known that because of this project, those properties would not need to be included into the program. This is another view of a subject property that's included. This is a view of another property that's residentially zoned that is also included. This is the view of the existing Circle K gas station at Rockfish and Main. This is a northwest view along Main Street, subject properties on the left, Carly C Shopping Centers on the right. This is a view of the Carly C Shopping, well, it's not Carly C's, but I think that's what everyone in town calls it. But this is directly across the street from the subject property. And this is a view looking southeast. I'm going to put the site plan back up. Now, in terms of the proposal, under the new development, the existing access off Rockfish Road will be eliminated. As you are aware, when you're coming down Rockfish, there is an existing entrance right into this parking lot off of Rockfish. Under this proposal, it will be closed off, and the access points now will be, there's an existing access point off Main Street that will be shifted further north. And now to access the site from the rear, you'd have to access it off of Bullet Street. So they're removing that access point directly off of Rockfish. There's a large detention pond proposed towards the northernmost portion of the development to comply with stormwater regulations, and there's also a landscape buffer proposed along that property line. 5-foot sidewalks are also proposed along North Main Street, Rockfish, and Bullet Street, with front yard setbacks proposed as 35 feet along North Main, 11 feet along Bullard, and 16 feet along Rockfish. The Rockfish setback would also comply with that State Farm building on the corner of Bullard and Rockfish that is not a part of this development. So that will remain, but the setback they're proposing of Rockfish would keep it in alignment with that particular structure. The developer has also agreed to retain all potential possible existing trees and is providing 42 parking spaces where only 10 spaces are required. Also in your packet, there was a list of negotiated conditions. The proposed use is a convenience store with gasoline sales. There's a long list of uses that are going to accompany this conditional zoning request. But if you see, there's a note that the property owner voluntarily agreed to exclude single-family and multifamily dwellings, motor vehicle parking lots for commercial, and vending machines outdoors from this application. The density is set at 2.68 acres. 130,000 plus square feet of commercial, 42 parking spaces as indicated earlier. The site plan is a part of this conditional zoning application. The landscape requirements are here, and I did speak to the landscape buffer. This project is in compliance with the 2030 Growth and Vision Plan. It calls for urban, and the Southwest Cumberland County plan calls for heavy commercial. The town staff recommendation is approval with the motion that's listed in your packet, as also recommended by the Cumberland County Joint Planning Board on October 16th. I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
Okay, at this time, we'll open the floor for hearing. If there's anyone here that would like to speak in favor of this rezoning?
Good evening. Can you hear me? Do I need to bring it down? Am I okay? Thank you. I'm used to just speaking right out in the classroom, so I don't have to worry about a mic. I'm Patsy West DeAlp, owner of one of the owners of the three of the properties that are being looked at tonight for possible rezoning. My address is 119 Cypress Lake Circle, Hope Mills, NC. This plot of land that we own and my cousin, the Clementes, has been in the Smith family, my grandfather's family, since the 1900s. Not the existing houses, although they may sometimes look like it, but it has been in his home, in his family for years. It was also my childhood home, and I have wonderful memories of growing up there. In early years, we would actually sit on my grandmother's front porch, that was the red house that you saw, and play a game called Count the Cars. Now, can you imagine doing that on Highway 59 today? In later years, we watched the parades and the fireworks from the same front porch. Since my dad's passing in 2011, I have owned and cared for the properties for the past 7 years. I have an integral connection to this town, having taught in the Hope Mills schools for over 30 years, and attending church up the street, not 5 minutes away from these properties, for about 60 years. And as dear as these memories are to me and to my family members, who do include the Clementes and my brother and my husband, we do realize that the purpose of this area is no longer residential. Our properties need to fit in, and they need to accommodate the current commercial needs that our community depends on every day. Our homes are surrounded by shopping centers, a bank, various offices, doctor's office, and Circle K. And we don't want to see our residential homes face further weathering by time and fail to be able to attract families to rent them. We're confident that the expansion the Circle K requests tonight will only add to the setting and will continue to serve the needs as they have for the past 30-plus years. Like us, too, they have a vested interest in the growth of our town. People used to ask my dad, what was it like living next door to a convenience store? And my dad always replied with the same comment, they're the best neighbors in the world. If we didn't believe that that was true, we wouldn't be here tonight supporting their request for rezoning. We truly believe that this will add to the setting of our town, and it will be in the best interest of our community. Thank you for considering it.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else would like to speak in favor of this?
How you doing? My name is Louis Frangos. I live in Fayetteville, 421 Edinburgh Drive. I work here in Hope Mills. I own Sammio's, and we have one of the properties getting rezoned. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm not too good of a speaker. Basically, my view on it is to basically beautify Hope Mills. Right now, you have basically all concrete, no landscaping, and the landscaping is amazing, especially the one at Cumberland Road. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this project?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the commission. My name is Andy Priolo. I'm with Circle K. I reside at 124 Hardy Ivy Way in Holly Springs. I'll be very brief. I know it's going to be a long night for everybody. But just briefly, our plan in Hope Mills is very much like our plan in Fayetteville and the surrounding area. We've got a lot of old, dilapidated convenience stores that are first generation that we need to clean up, we need to consolidate, we need to rebuild. And Hope Mills is no exception. So what our plan is, we've got 3 stores within a half a mile. And our plan is to consolidate those into one store on this corner. Here's a rendering of what it looks like. It's going to be identical to the one that we built earlier this year in Hope Mills. The island configuration is a little bit different, but the store itself is going to be the same. We're proud of our product. We think that it's going to be a much improved aesthetically situation over what's there today, and we ask your favorable approval. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this project? All right, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition of this project? Do I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Back to Mr. McLaughlin. Any questions of Mr. McLaughlin or any response from the board?
I just have one small question.
All right.
If the detention pond is on the north side, how are we gonna get the water there? You said in the drawing that you gave us
Yes, if you see.
that the detention pond is gonna be on the north end? And that's
Yes.
all uphill right there?
Yeah, the engineers here, that's basically something that, the stormwater, administrator probably can speak more on, but from my understanding, they typically do locate the detention pond somewhere on site that provides for, the best possible drainage of the site. Anything else is probably pumped, but I'm not sure exactly, what the topography is on this particular development, but I'm certain that that the detention pond is adequately located.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. McLaughlin?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we approve P 1836. The zoning on it.
Okay.
From residential to commercial. And what needs to be changed to commercial.
You need to read that motion that's in the
Yes, and what,
recommended motion.
and one thing I've been doing, I've been talking to several of you guys, what I'm starting to do now is I'm starting to craft a motion so that all you have to do is just read it directly.
And do you have that now, Commissioner Legg?
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
so he can read that motion for you.
The Town of Hope Mills Board of Commissioners votes to approve the rezoning from R6 residential O&IP planned office and industrial and C1P planned local business district to C1P planned local business district slices. CZ additional zoning for convenience store, retail gas station sales, and other specific requested allowed uses, and find it consistent with the text of the Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan of 2013, which recommends strict commercial zoning along North Main Street and is consistent with the location criteria for light commercial in the land use policies plan for 2009. I further find that approval of the C1P CZ district is reasonable and in the best interest because the district recommended will restrict the allowable usage to those that would be in harmony with the existing commercial uses in the area. Additionally, the applicant has verbally agreed to retain all possible existing trees and is requesting to provide a 35-foot yard setback from North Main Street, an 11-foot setback from Bullard Street, and a 16-foot front yard setback from Rockfish Road, aligning their setbacks with the existing structures of the adjacent property in the intersection of Bullard Streets and Rockfish Road. The owners has agreed to all ordinance and related conditions.
Okay, we have a motion. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Again, welcome back to Hope Mills.
Madam Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes.
To all parties involved in this, this is a huge and a beautiful addition to our community. And it's just like the one that was built up there on Rayford Road. And I tell you, I don't know how many times that I hear every week of how nice that business is, aesthetically, and the customer service and the convenience and what it has brought to our community versus what was there before you guys built it. So my hat's off to you for taking this endeavor on. Thank you.
And I'd also like to piggyback on Mr. Bellflower's, Andy and his group, they came in a while ago. They met with our plan review staff as many times as we needed to. They did exactly what we asked them. They worked very well with Cumberland County staff, and they specifically brought us a package that we all negotiate together. So I want to commend them as developers as well.
Oh, yeah, it's first class, clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have case P18-38, initial zoning of 2.8 plus or minus acres, CP Plan Commercial, or to a more restrictive zoning district located at the north side of North Carolina 59, North Main Street, west of Service Road 1115, Golfview Road, submitted by Joseph P. Riddle III on behalf of Carol Riddle.
This is just a second step in the process from the Chick-fil-A annexation that we just approved. As Mr. Riddle indicated, the initial zoning for this piece will be after the initial zoning is done. We're recommending the same CP designation as the existing 3101 North Main that's located in the town, and this will ultimately be combined with that parcel. We just approved the annexation. The initial zoning is the final step, but we actually wanted to fast track this and get it on the same agenda. So long as we did the initial zoning after the annexation, everything else should be fine. Planning board met on October 16th and recommended approval. Staff recommendation of approval as recommended by the Cumberland County Joint Planning Board is in your packets.
Okay. So at this time, I'll open public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this change from CP Plan Commercial to a more restrictive zoning? Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, do we have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
At this time, does the board have a recommendation?
Madam Mayor, make a motion in the case of P18-38 that we approve the initial zoning to CP Plan Commercial, and find A, that the approval is an amendment to the adopted current Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan 2014 map, and that the Board of Commissioners will not require any additional request or application for amendment to said map for this request. Item B, the following change in conditions was considered in amending the zoning ordinance zoning map to meet the development needs of the community. The parcel is being recombined with the adjacent property to the south, which is designated as heavy commercial in the Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan 2014, and the subject property meets the location criteria for heavy commercial as defined in the Land Use Policies Plan 2009. Item C, and this rezoning approval is reasonable and in the public interest because the town of Hope Mills initiated the request and the district requested is in harmony with the existing light and heavy commercial zoning and land uses along North Main Street, and this request will ensure the entire recombined parcel is zoned the same.
Okay, I have a motion. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Okay. Our next case, case P18-39, initial zoning of 4.93 plus or minus acres, CP Plan Commercial, or to a more restrictive zoning district located at 5435 Corporation Drive, and this is submitted by Jerry and Jacqueline Hall.
All right, this particular property, the board directed the town clerk to proceed with the self-sufficiency and confirmation of lots at the August 6th hearing. The official annexation was then approved by the Board of Commissioners at the August 20, 2018 board meeting, with staff requesting the CP Plan Commercial District for initial zoning to ensure consistency with the existing zoning that was currently in place in the Hope Mills MIA when it was permitted by the county. This move ensures that the density layout and setbacks approved through the permitting process in the county remains the same. October 16th, Cumberland County Planning Board recommended approval. Staff recommendation is also for approval as recommended by the Joint Planning Board. Motion is in your packets.
Okay, at this time I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this zoning? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? If not, do I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved, Mayor, and I'll make a motion in
All right.
case P1839 to approve initial zoning to CP Plan Commercial, find this recommendation to be consistent with the Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan 2014, which calls for heavy commercial at this location. CP Plan Commercial is classified as a heavy commercial zoning district, and further find approval of this request is reasonable and in the public interest because the request was initiated by the Town of Hope Mills staff, and the district is also in harmony with the surrounding zoning and existing land uses.
I have a motion. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Okay. Next is case P18-40, revision amendment to the Hope Mills zoning ordinance amending Article 14 signs, Section 102A-1402, sign definitions. Section 102A-1404, signs permitted in any district, subsection H, temporary political signs, and subsection L, sandwich board signs. Section 102A-1405, general sign and sign specifications, subsection C, freestanding sign location, all districts excluding billboards. Subsection D, maintenance and appearance of subsection G, unsafe and unlawful signs. Section 102A-1406, signs permitted by district, subsection A, residential and conservancy districts, and subsection B, professional, commercial, and industrial districts. Section 102A-1407, billboards, off-premise signs, subsection A, general provisions, and section 102A-1408, signs prohibited. I'll turn it over to you.
In terms of some background, the Town of Hope Mills conducted 2 separate work sessions at the request of the Town of Hope Mills Board of Commissioners. First one was held on July 9th, 2018. Second one was held July 23rd, 2018, to provide language tied to a comprehensive amendment to the Town of Hope Mills sign ordinance. These work sessions were also conducted to allow citizens and business owners an opportunity to address the board in support or in opposition of these amendments. Staff also conducted 2 massive mailouts to businesses within the Town of Hope Mills limits, and also went door to door to visit business owners directly. A synopsis of the proposed amendments are as follows. Pole signs will be removed from this ordinance, limiting all proposed freestanding signs to ground signs. Ground sign height and minimum setbacks from right-of-way will now be determined by the zoning of the parcel on which the sign will be installed. Sign maintenance and appearance standards are added to allow the removal of signs in disrepair or blocked from view by overgrown vegetation. Maximum allowable sign area for freestanding signs are reduced in all districts. Billboards will now only be allowed within 1,500 feet from the right-of-way of freeways. And signs attached to or painted on utility poles, telephone poles, trees, parking meters, bridges, and overpasses are now listed under prohibited signs. At the October 16th joint planning board meeting, the planning board recommended that the amendment be sent back to Hope Mills staff with county staff assistance and more public input to make the amendment more tolerable. Now, what you will see is my recommendation is for approval. If you dig deeper into the packet, the actual planning staff for Cumberland County recommended approval of this ordinance with my recommendation of approval, because what we're charged with looking at is whether it's compliant with the Southwest Land Use Plan, the 2030 Growth Plan, which it is. I also like to highlight, or at least ask the board to recall the fact that at the second public hearing that we had, you did make significant changes to address direct opposition to it. One of those changes was the removal of the 5-year amortization period. You originally had a 5-year period where it basically gave every business in the town 5 years to come into compliance. That was removed so that if this ordinance is adopted tonight, all existing signs are grandfathered. So I think Mr. Mitchell wanted us to add some language in to allow for political signs to be posted on the day of and things of that nature. So we have made some changes to it. But I'm recommending approval based on the fact that at staff level for the county and for planning staff, we're both in agreement. So I'm not aware of any changes that we could make that would not be probably directed by you guys. So I'd just like to basically turn it over to you guys. Whatever your decision is, I'll move forward with that directive.
Okay, we have some discussion.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor? I make a motion to approve case
gotta
number
do the
P
public hearing.
18-36. Right?
We gotta open the floor
have
for
to have a
opposition and
public hearing
support.
first,
Oh, we
I
do?
Yeah, you gotta have
Yeah.
a public
I
hearing.
thought we had already had that.
No.
We have to do it over since it
Yeah.
is coming
Yes.
back to
Right.
us.
Mhm. It's
Okay,
coming back to
sorry.
us.
Sorry.
I just wonder if there's any questions any of you have before, which I
Yeah,
thought
any
that would
questions you
be the
may-
question.
Yeah. I sat down, so that's my
Okay.
fault. But
All
any
right.
question that you have for me?
Okay. At this time, we'll open the floor for a public hearing. All those that would like to speak in favor of this ordinance, if you would, please come to the microphone at this time and state your name and address. Seeing none in favor, any who would like to come and speak in opposition to this, would you please come to the microphone at this time? And at the same token, name and address, and you give us your reasons.
Thank you, members of the town board. My name is Joe Riddle again, and I live at 125 Great Oaks in the city of Fayetteville. First, I'd like to say that I know that they did have the work sessions, but the work sessions were at 5 o'clock, and I missed one totally. In fact, I think I missed both of them, thinking that it was going to be at the regular meeting. So, I mean, most people can't make a work session at 5 o'clock. I mean, that really made it tough, I think, on business people. And I've read this 16-page sign ordinance in detail. I have the following observations. I do understand that the town, the town wants to make the town look better. I know that's in your interest, and I understand that there have been problem signage. There have been people that have abused the sign ordinance that you have now. I know that in talking to some of the staff and some of the board members that there's people that are trying to buy houses that put signs up, and then y'all take them down, and then they nail them on telephone poles and things like that, and then flashing signs that you didn't want and all that. And everybody wants to look like Pinehurst and Cary. I understand that. I mean, Fayetteville went through a long, arduous UDO that was about, I don't know, maybe 600 pages, and they've amended it maybe 200 pages now because a lot of the stuff that they wrote in that ordinance didn't work. So part of why I'm here, what I'm here is I have a lot of property in Hope Mills that I want to develop with good development and good signage. A lot out at the interstate, quite a bit down where Sonic is. I have some things that I'm working on now that are talking about coming here. And you can get too restrictive for people. I mean, you can get where people get turned off. And in my own hometown of Fayetteville right now, the local developers and the local builders have blackballed Fayetteville. And I'm one of them. I mean, I'm doing very little in Fayetteville now. They've made it too expensive for our market. Our market is more of a blue-collar market, all of Cumberland County. I mean, we would like to aspire to be Cary, but our people don't make $150,000 each, working as engineers in the Triangle Park. And we can be a real good Fayetteville, we can be a real good Hope Mills, we can be the best military community anywhere in the United States, I think, but we don't have the Triangle Park. So I caution the town in, I think this ordinance is too strict. There are good things about it. I think that it could be made into a good ordinance. I don't think it's all bad. For instance, and I'm not going to try to cite every single area, but where it talks about temporary signage, it talks about that if you have a real estate sign, it can't be but 2 foot by 4 foot. I mean, I have some nice 4x4s with the Williamsburg Post that we put that, like, we maybe manage a center, or sometimes it advertises vacant space. If you had a building empty in Hope Mills and I want to put a commercial sign on it, I usually have my name on there. I usually put the square footage of the building on there. A lot of times you'll put the acreage. You like to put the zoning on there so people know what they can and can't do, and a phone number. You can't get that on a busy road on a 2x4 temporary real estate sign. I mean, people are driving down a busy road, and we're going to have islands everywhere. So if you miss the sign, you're going to have to go down to a U, come back. If you go real slow, people rear end you. I mean, it's hard to read a lot of information on a 2x4 sign. That's too strict. I mean, it's much stricter than anywhere else in the county. even in Moore County, I have a shop center in Pinehurst, is not as strict as a lot of this. Temporary banners, I mentioned this at the last meeting, or one of the last meetings that we talked about it. You know, if you just want to eliminate temporary banners and say you can't have any, then do that. But when you say that you can have a temporary banner, but you can't use it but for 1 week, that's 4 times stricter than Fayetteville. And I think Fayetteville's really not good right now. I mean, I'm very against my town right now. I think they've gone over the board on how strict it is. 1 week for a banner, I mean, people aren't going to spend $400 or $500 for a nice banner for their grand opening, and then, you know, your building inspector who's going to issue these permits, and the people that have to cite you for, you know, your grass is too high and different things, they're going to be citing all these signs. You're going to have to add some staff because they're going to be really busy. Another place you had in here that, and I understand that when people's signs are unsightly, you know, they're damaged or whatever, you want them fixed, and there are people that don't ever fix things, and so the good people get punished because of the bad people. But, you know, the Taco Bell right now, the panels are out. We've just had 2 hurricanes. You know, I know they weren't yesterday, but I'm still paying for the damage I had. I had a tremendous amount of damage with roof leaks, ceiling tiles, and signage. I put the most expensive sign I've ever put up out in Stedman at the food line because they made me backwards when they moved 24. So I put this real big sign up. I had $15,000 damage on one pylon sign. It was over a $60,000 sign. And, you know, it takes time to get insurance proceeds. I mean, I didn't get paid for all of it. I had a pretty big deductible, but it took me, you've got in here that you have to fix a sign in 5 days. I mean, who can do that? I mean, can you fix problems with the town in 5 days? I mean, it doesn't even say business days. I mean, it's just 5 days. So you could have damage on a Thursday, and if you didn't have it by next Tuesday, you've already violated it. And if you have, you know, we're going to have more hurricanes. That's where most of the sign damage comes from, high wind, and you're not going to be able to get the insurance claim fixed that quick. And you're certainly, if we have a hurricane and everybody's sign panels are blown out, these sign companies, there's only 2 or 3 around here. Mr. Parrish died in Rayford, so they're probably not as capable as they used to be, and there's people in Dunn, but there's not many people that can do those nice pylon signs or the monument signs. So if the panels blow out and all the sign companies are busy, that's going to be hard to obey. If you look, you know, I was thinking that the town was going to be more lenient out on the interstate. You know, right now you got it where you can have billboards out there, but you still can't have a pylon sign on the interstate. And you know, when you're driving the interstate, you know, you really want to be able to see the signage, so you know, like I look for exits where I can eat and, you know, and I know they have the signs on the road, but if you start talking about monument signs that aren't 6 foot tall, where you used to allow 30-foot signs, that's a fifth as high. And if you're driving down the interstate or even on Chicken Foot Road, it's going to be hard to see those signs. I thought that with the interstate, y'all were going to make an exception, but I guess your exception is only with billboards. And a billboard, you couldn't put a billboard on a lot. Like, say, if I built a Chick-fil-A out at the interstate, Chick-fil-A couldn't have a billboard because a billboard advertises things that aren't on the premises. So you'd have to use a monument sign at the interstate, I guess. You know, if you get so strict that new business doesn't come behind you, then you won't have as much increased tax base. And, you know, I know the guy was showing the video, or he was showing about borrowing money and bond money and stuff and raising taxes, but it's a whole lot better when you get new taxes rather than having to raise tax on the people that are here, because taxes are pretty high right now. I mean, I think most people think they're paying about as much as they can pay. If you go back and look on one of the pages here, there are all these different square footages where, like, one sign you've gone from 50 square feet to 24, so that's less than half. There's another one that used to be 100, you're saying 32, that's less than a third. There's another one that was 200, you say you can have 50 now, that's 25%. Another one was 100, now it's 32, that's 32%. I mean, then there's one that was 200, now that you can go 75. I mean, that's a huge change. I mean, I don't think it's going to work for everybody, and I think that you're going to end up with a lot of people coming in front of the same board asking for variances on their signage all the time. But the town, it's in your hands. I pray that whatever you decide will work for the businesses, because businesses are key. I mean, I'm not just talking about developers. I'm talking about real estate people that are trying to help market stuff. I'm talking about contractors. I'm talking about the existing businesses, because if a hurricane messes their sign up, I don't think I think the way this is written, you can make them put a monument up and tear down their sign if it gets damaged. And it hadn't been looking good. I had a lot of claims in the hurricane, so it was bad for me. But I appreciate y'all being here, and hopefully you'll make a good decision. I think it's fine to change your ordinance. I just think that this needs more work. I really do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this?
Evening, members of the commission. My name is Lonnie Player. I'm an attorney residing in Fayetteville, North Carolina. My office address is 400 Westwood Shopping Center. I won't belabor the point of what Mr. Riddle said. I'm here on his behalf tonight, and I'm here on behalf of several other local developers doing business in Hope Mills. And I understand the spirit behind the ordinance and don't necessarily disagree with it. From a legal standpoint, what I'd like to do is point out, with the reduced sign sizes, a fairly significant legal ambiguity that is going to arise out of your existing ordinance. If you take a look at section 102A-1403, subparagraph F, exempt signs include signs that are not legible from a public or a private street. Now, the legal definition of legibility is capable of being read with ease. If you make a sign so small that it can't be read by the occupant of a vehicle traveling at the speed limit on coming to the sign, then it's exempt under your ordinance. And I think you're going to get a lot of challenges on that point. And one of the reasons why is a point that Mr. Riddle made that I happen to agree with. Folks, businesses put up signs because folks want to read them, and they want to read them so that they know where they're going. And the Circle K folks that I was talking to, who were here tonight, said, people want to read gas signs. They slow down to do it because they want to see what the price of gas is, because they're going to bargain shop for that. If you have a sign that is so small that you can't read it coming on at 45 miles an hour, especially on North Main Street, you're going to have a lot of rear-end collisions. It's going to become a significant public safety issue for the town. But as I said, my larger point is, with the reduced sign sizes, you've got a very significant ambiguity in your existing ordinance that is going to be exploited. I just want to point that out to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this ordinance change? Okay, do I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
So moved. At this time, do we have any questions that we would like to direct to Mr. McLaughlin, or any questions in reference to what we're going to do next?
May I have some comments?
Yes, sir.
I don't think it's directed toward Chancellor.
Well, not to cut you off, but I'd like to highlight, at least clarify a few things.
Okay.
When several members were speaking about banners or temporary real estate signs, those are not being changed in this ordinance. That language for temporary banners for 1 week and the temporary real estate signs are existing in the existing ordinance that is not being amended. So those changes are already in there. And they're not being requested by this ordinance. Also, the 5 days tied to defective signs. In this change, that 5 days refers to the amount of time your sign can remain defective before we cite you for having to fix it. It doesn't mean that we're giving you 5 days to fix it. It just simply says that if your sign is dilapidated for more than 5 days, then we have the right to tell you to comply. We didn't put a duration of time in there that we said that once we cited you, you had to fix. Another thing in terms of the square footages, those had to be reduced because if you get thinking practicality, if we have a current 30-foot sign height, 100 square feet does not look that big at 30 feet. You lower it down to 6 feet, 100 square feet is a wall. So I was forced to reduce the sign square footages to comply with the reduction in sign heights. Also, the 32 square foot sign, in terms of being a sign that was too small to see, that 32 square foot is also ironically the exact same maximum allowable sign for political signs. So if you recall, we just had an election last month. The biggest sign that you saw, some of them were very large. That's a 32 square foot sign. That's an 8 foot by 4 foot sign. So I do think that most people who voted were able to read those signs pretty legibly. So I wanted to at least clarify a few things to make sure that you're aware of what was and was not being changed as a part of this amendment.
Chancellor, are the points of interest that Mr. Riddle brought up, are they valid?
I would respectfully say no, because again, banners were not being changed as a part of this ordinance. That was already in place as allowed for a week period. If you recall, we were allowing temporary banners because most people wanted to be able to advertise a grand opening, but we did not want them to put a permanent movable sign out by the street. Again, we're talking about temporary real estate signs. What he mentioned about that's not being changed as well. That was in the ordinance last year. So we're not doing anything with this ordinance that is directly tied to what some of his testimony was related to. So I respectfully would say that would not be valid comments. Like I said, again, we were talking about the 5-year period. Our ordinance is not requiring you to comply with the dilapidated sign in 5 days. We're telling you if the sign is dilapidated for more than 5 days, we're going to actually start enforcing you to comply. So if you recall, some of the testimony that was brought out at our 2 work sessions, we're talking about how staff every Friday is having to go out and we're picking up about 70 signs every Friday, ranging from junk car signs. People used to tape signs to light posts. Now they're drilling them in with bolts. There are a lot of different things that we're doing, and this ordinance, from my understanding, from the direction from you guys, is not being done just based on heights. It's being done on signs that do not look like they're professionally done, signs that are not consistent throughout the town, enforcement issues with, and as quickly as we take the signs down, they're coming right back up. I think during one period we took down a bunch of signs, like 50 signs on a Friday. By Monday, it's 30 more signs in the same location. So we have to do something, and I do not think that there's any sweeping amendment that you're going to make to an ordinance that's not going to have some opposition. But I do think the board did, through those 2 work sessions, go to great lengths to ensure, because I do think a lot of the concerns that you guys had were making sure that we did not move in a way that was very heavy-handed with small businesses, which is what led to us removing the 5-year amortization period as well.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
my concern with this ordinance is that I don't want us to have a lot of challenges. I don't want us to have a lot of safety issues. I don't want us to have a lot of variances. And I surely don't want us to handcuff businesses that look at Hope Mills as an opportunity. And if we need to work further on this ordinance, then we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our businesses to get a win-win ordinance. No ordinance is going to be perfect. But it seems like we've still got some more work to do on this one. And that's just my thought. If we need to look at it again, and if we need to have another workshop, and like Joe said, not at 5 o'clock, I mean, that's a tough time for anybody to go to a workshop. It's a tough time to even drive around Hope Mills at 5 o'clock.
And would a recommendation be to have maybe some of our, if nothing more are small business owners in Hope Mills, or those businesses that are going to be affected by this, to be part of that and by special invitation to get them here. Because I think that we did not see that many of our business owners here when we talk about signs, because I don't think until you feel the effect, you don't pay attention. But once you see what it's going to happen to you, then I think that maybe we need some input from some of our citizens and some of those that are going to be impacted the most. And again, our commercial dollars is what's kept Hope Mills alive.
I agree.
We have not had to raise taxes because commercial dollars have balanced it out. So that's my personal thoughts. Any other discussion or thoughts on this?
Yes, ma'am, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Chancellor, do we have anything in the ordinance at all, as Mr. Riddle spoke, a hurricane or a storm damages your sign? You said you talked with them within 5 days. Do we have a clause in there anywhere that gives them a grace period to replace the damaged sign by hurricane or damage?
I would say no. Currently, we do not have specific language that ties to any damages, but I will tell you what has been our customary practice since I've been here. Anytime there are permits that are needed that are tied to anything that was destroyed by a natural disaster, I typically waive my fees. So if it's a fence that was torn down and they're coming to have to replace it because it was torn down as a result of a hurricane, or if it's a sign, I have personally, and we also talked with our chief building inspector to give that leniency to waive those fees for those permits, because we do not feel that it's fair for you to have to pay to get it. You know, we can't waive the cost of the manufacturer, but I do think we have actually gone to great lengths. That is not in writing, to answer your question directly. And to piggyback on what the mayor and Mr. Bellflower said, I'm not opposed to any additional work sessions that you would like us to have. I'm following the directives of the board. I will say that one thing I've done in my experience in planning, a lot of times what does tend to get a bigger crowd out is when you start going door to door. So I did that with this ordinance. I can't speak to why who actually did come, but I did 2 periods of massive mail outs, and I went door to door to what I would consider a lot of the small businesses to explain to them, like, look, this is because in the mail outs that I do typically send, I send the existing sign ordinance and a cover sheet that explains we're exploring making all signs ground signs. We're exploring drastically reducing the square footages. This is the actual work session. You may want to come out. I explained that a little further, because sometimes if you get a notice in the mail from the city, some people read them, some people don't. If you get a knock on the door of your business and it's the same guy that mailed the letter and I'm coming to personally invite you, sometimes they'll be more apt to come. I can't speak to why they don't. I don't have a problem doing it again if you guys want us to go back. But my point with my recommendation is, if you guys want us to work further, I will need some direction, because based on the ordinance that you approved to move forward, myself and county staff were in support of that ordinance. But if there are some changes you want us to possibly take back, or if you want to just take this ordinance and make sure a lot of people are more aware of it, that's up to you guys. But I would like to at least see some direction so we'll know what amendments we need to make to this ordinance to make it better.
A question for you that and just let me ask, because it's on top of my. If the sign's destroyed by the hurricane, does that mean when you rebuild it that you've got to follow the ordinance? I think that was another question that was asked, because see, if
now that's a really good question.
because
Yeah.
I think that's not detailed in there. So
It's
that
not.
would mean is, if I'll use my own business, if my sign comes down, then when I build it back, then I'm going to have to follow that sign guideline, which is going to mean no longer do I have that grace.
Now that
So
that
I
is
think
what-
that's that part right there, I think is going to hurt our major shopping centers that have the signs right now that are going to be allowed to stay until the.
Now, I think that, now that this is coming up, I think that language should be added regardless in terms of a hurricane, because we do not have that language. And now I do have the leeway to waive a fee. I do not have the leeway to waive a grandfather clause. So that is a very, very valid point. And I will just fully disclose to you, since a lot of businesses were aware that this ordinance was coming forward tonight, I did get an influx of sign permits the last couple of weeks, trying to get them in, not knowing which way the board was going to move with this case. I don't have any dog in the fight. I'll go with whatever directions that the board has. I just wanted to clarify a few things just to make sure that we're speaking from the same set of cards.
Edwards, you had a comment?
Yes, based on the things that Mr. Riddle has said and the things he brought up and what Commissioner Bellflower said, the mayor, we do have a little bit of controversy and things that really need to be cleared up a little bit better. And maybe it would be better for us just to hold off for a little while.
To me, again, if that's the wishes of the board, I can do that as well, and maybe I'll come back with some suggestions. But I do think that if we do hold off, I'll get a little bit more aggressive with trying to get some of the small businesses, because that's probably who's going to be affected the most in terms of the cost to comply. But I'll do a more aggressive approach to try to get them to these work sessions. I'm not sure if you guys want to entertain another time or make the work session a part of a regular hearing. That way it'll start after the 7th. I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am. I keep calling sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
One, I agree that the county has given the go-ahead approval as well as our town staff. And I know I'm not going to be developer's favorite person, but I'm a fan of the UDO because we wouldn't have cleaned up downtown Fayetteville if it hadn't been strict. And that is one of the biggest complaints that we have in Hope Mills, is that it looks messy and unorganized, and the signs are willy-nilly, they're tall, they're short, they're all over the place, there's no consistency, and they don't like it. They think it looks ugly. And that was one of the things that has improved with downtown with their strict UDO, which is hard on developers, but it is kind of the way you got to push that process through to start doing the cleanup. And we made a lot of concessions from the very first one to this one, a lot. So
I will say, just to tie into Commissioner Larson, I think the balance that is what we're trying to find.
Right.
How can we address some real serious issues in the town that would allow us to keep these signs consistent, nice looking, uniform? How do we do that and balance any negative impacts with businesses? I guess we didn't go, I'm not sure, but I do think that that's what we were doing when we came up with this ordinance, because as Mrs. Larson, Commissioner Larson stated, the second draft was in direct response to a lot of feedback we had. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's digestible to the business community, but I do think that we did a great deal trying to draft the best ordinance we can. But like I stated before, I don't know of any change, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's signs, that we could do that's sweeping, because we're not going to go with an amendment with one issue. We're not going to do an amendment to the sign ordinance just because we have to pick up 70 signs. But when I have to pick up 70 signs, when we have signs that are dilapidated, we have signs that aren't uniform, when we have all these issues, then I have to at least acknowledge some trends and some ways to actually bring that into compliance. But whatever the wishes are of the board, I'm willing to move forward in that direction.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask the attorney a question? Should we look at possibly passing this ordinance with future amendments that would have to take effect to keep somebody from coming in and misusing the ordinance that we have now or proposed? Or what would be your suggestion on how to do that?
Well, it's really the will of the board. I mean, I guess you could pass one that you know you're going to be amending in the future in order to to stop people from applying for the current system, but it's still, I mean, I think that process has probably already taken place, that the people who were going to apply to get in under this ordinance have probably already done so. And so you may want to look at just kind of getting it right the first time. If you know there's amendments that you're probably going to want to make, it probably makes sense to go ahead and work those out before you put it in place, so that you're not having to, because every time you amend the ordinance, you're going to have to do a new public hearing and a new, I think it probably makes sense at this point to go ahead and do whatever amendments you're going to do in there and then adopt the ordinance rather than doing it piecemeal, because I think people who are going to apply in order to beat the deadline have probably already done that.
And I will say, just to harp back on what Mayor Warner said, if just to hold it off for that hurricane language, I'm in support of that, because I have no, if I did get someone that had a major sign destroyed, I can't waive a grandfather clause. I can waive my fees, but I can't waive that.
Just on that point, the purpose behind a grandfathering clause is to prevent someone from having to put in the money and time to replace a sign that is already existing, that is working. If a sign is destroyed, you need to think about, do you want the incentive to be, go ahead and put a sign in that is consistent with the new ordinance? Or do you, I mean, you don't want someone spending a bunch of money to put in a new sign that's still going to have to be replaced in a certain period of time. So that's just you might want to consider that when you're thinking about grandfathering in signs that are destroyed, because I think that kind of defeats the purpose of the grandfathering clause, which is to make someone not have to spend that money. But
Madam,
again, go overboard.
Yes,
Madam
sir.
Mayor, I think we should take the time and get this right. I do. I really do. And that my recommendation is another workshop, maybe a final workshop. But it seems like each time that we discuss this, we get more ideas and more direction and more things that we need to look at and review and adjust. Take the time to get it right the first time on the front end.
Let me ask a question, speaking on ideas. One of the ideas that I floated during one of the work sessions, I'm not sure if this is what you wanted to move. I'm just trying to get some information out of you guys. There was an option to tier the setbacks and heights, meaning that you still allow for ground signs at the street level, but you did allow for signs to be higher as they step back. So you had a 6-foot sign at 5-foot setback. You would have for maybe a 12-foot sign at a 10-foot, and currently it's 30. Without any change, it was 30. But I will say, we went from unlimited sign heights to 30-foot sign height last year, and nothing happened. So I mean, I will say, there are some changes that may yield some negative impacts, and some changes that may not yield anything other than signs that are 30 feet. So I'm not sure, but I would like to get some direction. I do have the hurricane language, but anything specific, it sounds like Mr. Riddle's main issue was the square footages and heights. If you guys wanted me to explore some, and like I said, that the square footages were changed to comply or at least be uniform with going with ground signs, because you can't have a ground sign at 100 square feet. That's not going to be sightly at all. So you have to drastically reduce those. But if you want me to explore some other options,
Would it be feasible to have that workshop and make sure that we have that input? Those that spoke at the planning board meeting, those that could help as far as looking at it closely, because it affects them, and then that way we would have at least their input. If we go and keep it like it is, that's fine, but I just believe they've spoken twice now. They spoke here,
And
they
I
spoke to
think-
the planning board, and now they've come back to speak
and I
again.
think you're getting it from the industry, and specifically, I emailed Joe twice last weekend, today, just to say, hey man, just to let you know, although the planning board recommended deferral, our board could potentially adopt this case. So just giving them a courtesy and also letting them know Chick-fil-A was on the agenda as well. So I do think anybody, whether we had the food truck ordinance and we had food truck business owners here, I think if you get input directly from the people in the industry, because I look at Mr. Riddle is not a business owner, he's a developer. And so he's in the business of trying to attract businesses here. So anybody at his level, Mr. Player, attorneys, anybody at the small business level that can provide us some input because they're dealing with this directly, I think that would be beneficial. So did you guys want to make a decision on the time now? Because I'm hearing at 5 o'clock is probably not the best time to have another work session.
You can make a motion to approve it and then take a vote on that. Or the action can be no action on the ordinance until further discussion or further. So the motion can go either way. Am I
Yeah, you
correct in
can make a
that?
motion.
You can make a motion to table this until such time as you
Yeah.
have a chance to have an
Another
opportunity to
workshop.
have more input, another workshop, and then bring it back to the board. If you want to put a date on that, you can. Likewise, or if
That
you
would be
wanna-
my motion, Mayor. That would be my motion. But
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
It's hard to get a workshop this time of year.
Well, you might have to move it
We
into
may have to go
January.
into January.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking January would have to be,
I think it'd be impossible to get one on
Yeah.
the 17th.
mid part of
December.
January.
Yeah.
Mid part of January.
January 14th, 7
Second
o'clock.
here in January.
It's a Monday.
is that Martin Luther King?
That's the next, Martin Luther King Day is 21st, isn't it?
Did we put the schedule out yet?
We did that,
You've got a schedule.
Get your schedule in front of you.
I think the 14th fine, isn't it, as far as holidays? Yeah, because we're meeting on Tuesday the 22nd, so Martin Luther King Day must be the 21st.
That's correct.
14th?
Monday, the 14th.
14th it is.
7 o'clock.
7.
At 7.
Monday.
The final workshop.
And it'll just be on the regular agenda for the 7
That
o'clock.
was not a
board meeting.
regular meeting. That
Yeah,
has to
that's
be
a special meeting.
It's a special meeting.
It would be a
Oh,
special
okay.
meeting.
Special meeting to just to
7.
have workshop on the sign ordinance. And at that time, we need to make sure that we get those parties.
Yeah, and like I
involved.
said, I'll go get more aggressive. It's specifically getting those guys in and look at the minutes to get everybody else that spoke, but to also get some more small businesses.
I think is there a formal motion?
My motion was to table action on the ordinance until the next scheduled workshop, which will be January 14th at 7 p.m. It's a special meeting. And this is the last one, guys. We wanted to be balanced, but we also want this thing to be fair.
Yeah.
And there's still some work to be done on it. We know that. And let's take the time to get it right going into the new year.
All right.
That's just my motion, Mayor.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor, and that motion is that we have a workshop on the 14th, invite all parties to come to that, to have time to discuss what we can do to tweak this or move forward with this.
All right.
All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Any opposed? So it'll be a 4-1, so it passes, and we'll make sure that we'll get that information out to those people that need to be here at that meeting.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks.
sir.
Thanks, Chancellor.
Next thing on our agenda is public comments. I know that some that signed up for public comments have spoken because you were speaking toward the hearings. Those that, I'll call your name if I know that you have not spoken, and if you want to speak, you can come forward. Again, the public comments are a 3-minute time frame, and if there's someone here, first of all, we'll start with, I know that Ms. Dialp has already spoken, so the next person on my list is Elizabeth Cooper.
Hello, Board of Commissioners. Elizabeth Cooper. I live at 4413 Goldenrod Court, Parkton, North Carolina, 28371, but I am a resident of Hope Mills. First, I wanted to briefly touch on the whole sign thing real quickly, and that is that I do agree that we need some consistency and there does need to be change, and I totally support an ordinance. But in regards to what Mr. Riddle said, isn't there some way that when the governor puts in a state of emergency that there could be some kind of waiver clause on something like that only for events related to the state of emergency, is what I would imagine. Something along those lines so that you don't get people abusing, we had a storm, whatever. Anyway, because, we get some bad storms that aren't states of emergency. So, the reason I wanted to speak tonight is because I wanted to address some of the issues that I have as a citizen and as somebody who voted for each and every one of you. You all have been in your positions now for almost a year since the last election, and honestly, you haven't accomplished a whole hell of a lot. A lot of what you have focused on is pay raises and benefits packages. You've turned down opportunities for growth in our community. I'm glad to see the Chick-fil-A thing, but you've had a lot of opportunities out there. You keep saying that you need more time to review things before you can make a decision because you want this planning thing. As soon as the planning comes to you with the preliminary discussion from the surveys, you talk about folding under Fayetteville Cumberland Parks. Well, how does that make any sense? You allocate an additional $40,000 for a study that you decide you're just going to shelve and go to Fayetteville and let them control everything. How is that being a good steward of our community resources? How is that you doing your job? Okay? I don't understand how you can allocate money for a plan that you have no intention of using. Finally, when are you getting ready for 295 and the expansion of Golfview? You want to put in, the Parks and Rec thing on Golfview without even doing any research into what they're going to tear out as soon as they start rebuilding that road. You're going to put in a driveway or a parking lot, and it's just going to get tore up in a year when they go to put that road in for 4 lanes. How does that make any sense? You don't have, we have teenagers who potentially could use something like the park, like the golf course, if everyone's allowed on it, to become a place where they destroy things and hang out and create problems that we've had right here in the municipal park that years ago we had to tear all the trees and everything that they were hiding in to drink and smoke and do whatever else they could do out of the sight of people. So I think you really need to re-examine what your efforts are and how you're using your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Andy has spoken. Rick Baker. Okay. Lewis has spoken. Al Ferry.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners, Mrs. Mayor, Town of Hope Mills. Al Ferry, 4014 Craigwood Lane, Hope Mills, North Carolina. I guess before I start mine, I do applaud your efforts for opening the golf course. I'm really a fan of having something more productive for our citizens, especially our youth. Place to go, something positive. Moving on from that, I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about decorum and kind of what I witnessed here last week. And I do not wish to disparage. I do not wish to point anyone out. I just wanted to say that, look, that was kind of an ugly thing to watch from out here. It got to a point where it became almost one-sided, or very one-sided. It got to a point where if one of your representatives was countering a point, they were being shut down with point of order, which means that we as citizens are not being allowed to be represented when that happens. I'd just like to ask, I've seen a lot better professionalism out of everybody up here And I would like to ask all of you to remember that discipline and professionalism that I've seen before. Other than that, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Darren Balsam.
How you doing? I'm Darren Balsamo. I'm the owner of Surge Trampoline Park. I'm from Monroe, Louisiana. My permit was issued on a condition that we put in sidewalks. There's been 2 other businesses that have opened in the same shopping center that didn't have to put sidewalks in. And I'm not quite sure how that happened. I would recommend that we lift the condition off of my permit and issue us a permanent permit and go talk to the building owner who is actually responsible for putting that sidewalk in. The sidewalk on either side of us it's a dead end. Papa John's has no sidewalk. The car wash has no sidewalk. So I'm not quite sure why we are required to put a sidewalk in. I mean, when my permit was issued, it was the condition, and I didn't know anything about it, or we would have addressed it when we were issued our permit to, start our work.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what we have to do at this point to fix the problem. But I mean, if I build a sidewalk and the car wash never has to build a sidewalk and Papa John's never has to build a sidewalk, then we're building a sidewalk for nothing. I mean, I don't know how we fix it, but I mean, I would like for us to figure out how we do fix it. And I also believe it's responsibility of the building owner and not the businesses. The businesses, we've sunk our hard money into opening these places. And, the building owner, I mean, it's on his property. I mean, I just don't feel it's our responsibility to build a sidewalk on the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Mayor, about that?
Mm-hmm.
Chancellor, you want to comment about this? Please, sir.
Change of business.
With respect to Surge, Surge was notified on May the 5th, 2018, when their zoning permit was issued, that sidewalks were required. The zoning permit had the condition sheet attached to it when it was issued in May. I will say that planning staff with the county also goes to great lengths when people file these applications to let them know what some of these conditions are. Prior to the approval or consideration from the board, developers are given draft conditions. So there are at least 3 different points of contact prior to completion of construction where they're made very aware of these requirements. With respect to Papa John's was approved. They actually wanted, they raised the same issues. They went ahead and said they were going to move forward. They're running into some issues with DOT with respect to that driveway permit that's required, but they have not indicated that they don't have a desire or are not willing to put them in. The reason why we issued the agreement with Surge is because I have been tracking it for about ever since May. My responsibility is to make sure you're aware of the requirements. It's not to make sure you're putting them in through construction. I'm not someone that deals with the permits directly outside of issuing my zoning permit on the front end and my final inspection on the back end. So when they came to me on the back end a few weeks ago, when I was talking to the chief building inspector, and I was asking, are those sidewalks in? So one of the contractors came to us and said, hey, I didn't know about this. So I conveniently pulled out my zoning approval from May and let it be and showed that they were well aware of the fact before the permit was even issued. Now, with respect to the responsibility of the business owner or the tenant, that's not something I'm charged with the authority to to determine who should be responsible. But if you are aware, at the last hearing, I did move forward with, you guys approved me to move forward with some legislation to massage some of these requirements in response to some of the issues that have been raised by tenants in buildings that are just moving into existing commercial structures and they don't own them. So it just so happened that Surge got their approval before the legislation actually came back. I think it should be coming back to us and within the next month. With respect to the two businesses that are within that shopping center, there's a credit union that came after Surge did. It just so happened that Surge was on the hook for the portion of the sidewalk that another business in that same shopping center would have had to do, but we didn't divvy out. Surge, you put in this section, anybody else puts in this section. It just so happened that they were the tenant that unfortunately got the hook on putting them in. And any tenant that would come after, the reason why they were not required is because they were the portion of the sidewalks that Surge would put in covered the sidewalks that the credit union would put in. So I'm not saying that I don't sympathize with the issue, but these are sidewalk regulations in the subdivision ordinance. We just had McDonald's on the agenda. If you notice, McDonald's is on your agenda.
Yep.
That sidewalk requirement was triggered because of umbrellas. So there are sometimes these sidewalk requirements are triggered. I don't agree with them either, but I do have to enforce them. With respect to McDonald's, because the awnings they were putting up were permanent, they're just resurfacing a patio in the front. But because the benches they were putting in permanent awnings, it triggered that very vague definition of development, which triggered the sidewalk requirements.
Just a question, and this is this something that also needs another look? Because what I'm hearing is that personally, I believe the owner of that shopping center should be responsible. Otherwise, I don't see how you're going to get business to come if, just kind of like I've associated with the daycare that was going to go or the spa that was going to go.
Yeah.
If you have to come in as a tenant, as a renter, and put in a sidewalk, and this is speaking from the heart, Bilo sat empty for so long.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
And I mean, I'm looking at
agree.
this, you finally got a tenant in there, and if we're going to turn this tenant out because of a sidewalk that, I'm also thinking, when we did the multimodal congestion plan, if you look at what our streetscape is going to look like, if we move forward with that, then it might not look like what we want it to look like. And would we tear theirs up to put another one?
I will say the ordinance that I'm waiting to get back from the county is in direct result of what you're saying. If you recall, my presentation was because I've seen at least 7 to 10 developments within a year that have come through here to get approved for site plan approvals, but it's a beauty salon in an existing building, and our ordinance does not give me the authority to determine who is responsible. It's just the development that is approved. These are the conditions.
Right.
So the ordinance that I'm trying to get back here for adoption, we created thresholds that stated that if it's no exterior construction of any kind, sidewalks will not be required. That covers the tenant that comes in who's not the owner.
Right, right.
But it also puts a threshold in place where if you're doing a certain amount of construction that's over 50% of the overall value of the building, then they are going to be required. And if it's brand new construction, then you're on the hook completely. So my point is that ordinance that I got you guys to approve that we're waiting to get back from planning board is a direct result of me going to a town manager saying, look, I got some concerns here because these projects are just not, you guys may not see it on your radar because you're approving them. I see it on my radar because when they filed for the zoning permit, even though the county told them sidewalks are required, even though they got a copy of the draft conditions before they came to the board, and even though I'm telling them when I'm approving them, for some reason it's not sticking. But I do sympathize if I'm not the owner of it. Papa John's ironically, the owner of Papa John's, that parking lot, actually was the one that said, you know what, he was going to apply for a variance. I met with him about 4 separate times. He didn't agree with him either. I tried to figure out a way to circumvent it, or at least get him a variance, but that variance is going to be a little challenging to get because this, if you recall, this daycare center, you granted a variance for their sidewalks, but specifically because DOT is putting their sidewalks on Rockfish and Garfield themselves, so it makes no sense to make them put them in, and then they're going to get dug back up. So I will say all that to say we are aware of the challenges specifically to tenants, and we have an ordinance that is in the process of being adopted by the planning board. It just so happened that any small business or any site plan approval that comes through during that time prior to, I have no mechanism to waive it other than telling them to apply for a variance. With respect to Surge, one of the reasons why we did the memorandum was because they were trying to open that day or the very next day. Telling them to apply for a variance that'll get them here in 2 months is not practical. So I talked to the town manager, hey, what can we do to make this work? So I can't make the sidewalk requirements go away, but we at least tried to at least alleviate enough to get them open. So it's like I said, it's not that I don't sympathize with the argument. It's just based on the regulations that I currently have in place right now. That's what I have.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
That building's been sitting empty for years.
I agree.
Years. Until this man brought a business to go in and occupy that building. He's not the owner. He's a tenant.
Yes.
And he comes here in good spirit, in the business spirit. And here we're going to handcuff him by putting in sidewalks on a piece of property he doesn't own, just because he's a tenant. You think that's fair?
My ordinance does not, and I'm not trying.
Maybe I'm passionate about it.
No,
I
agree.
apologize to this board and the folks in the audience. I just, it bothers me when I see stuff like this. It does. So what's the pathway forward? How can we fix this to make it fair?
The path, to me, the pathway forward is actually on the way back. I'm just simply saying it was unfortunate that Surge got their approval before the ordinance came back. I don't know of anything else other than just outright waiving, and I don't have that authority. So usually when I start being presented with these issues, my next charge is to come to you guys and say, hey, I'm noticing some trends that appear to be very, very negatively impacting small businesses, which is why I moved forward with that ordinance. It's just a situation where, just like the sign ordinance, I had 3 packages come in last week knowing that you guys were possibly approving this ordinance. So anything that comes in before that ordinance gets back to you guys with the specific language that would allow us to soften this. If I get another project like McDonald's just basically said we were withdrawing our application, and they're using temporary umbrellas because they actually realized what was the threshold that was triggering the sidewalks, and they just came in below that. But that was me contacting them prior to.
But they own that building.
To me, whether they own it or not,
Yeah.
I sympathize with respect to, if I go out to that site, there's about 3 feet of space between the curb and that retaining wall at McDonald's. You can't get a 5-foot sidewalk in. That's on Main.
Yeah.
If you go on the Camden side, there's an electric transformer there. So it can be done. It's gonna turn a patio project into a $40,000 undertaking. So instead of putting McDonald's in a position where they come here and get an approval, because once you get approved, you have to.
Yeah.
I basically notified them, hey, I'm gonna notify you again. Please look at this condition sheet. Condition number 8 requires sidewalks. Are you aware of this? I got 4 emails, one from the owner of McDonald's asking to withdraw it because of that reason. I'm simply saying until that ordinance comes back that gives me that authority to have the thresholds, I don't have any mechanism to not enforce these
So
regulations.
should he apply for a variance?
I guess.
Yeah, I think, if I may, I think that would be the appropriate you know, if that's what a variance is for, is
Yeah.
where unnecessary hardship results from carrying out
Yeah.
the strict letter of a zoning ordinance. And if that
And
is-
what he's saying is the variance is the mechanism in
Yeah.
place for
Right.
relief. It's just that with Surge, they were needing to open the very next day. Me telling them to apply for a variance made no sense. That doesn't mean that they can't apply for
you
one.
could still apply.
You can
today
still
for a
apply for
variance.
one, but it's just,
How long does it take for a variance?
Current deadline is just under 6. Well, for a small town, it's 2 months. So if you apply anytime, any day in January or any day in December, it would come to the Board of Adjustment in February. If you apply any day in January, it would come to you all in March. It's a 2-month
Yeah.
process.
now,
Which is fine, but we would need to get, Ray and them to at least.
Yeah.
Temporary.
Yeah.
now, if we're in the if we're talking about Surge and talking about working with them, we do currently have a memorandum of understanding for them to put in the sidewalks in a reasonable amount of time. If during that time you guys are open to allowing them to apply for a variance, I honestly
We could
think
extend the
we can
temporary
extend that
CO.
deadline to keep them from being in violation of anything. Because that's one thing I told them. We're not here to shut down businesses. That's
Right,
not.
right.
But sometimes you get put in positions where I don't have the authority to alleviate something. I do think that possibly will work. What I also will say that I can take the responsibility of what happens when developers, and there's a language they use when they say sidewalks to nowhere. In their mind, they're not connected to anything. In my plan in mind, the next door neighbor will come and he'll tie in. Well, my point is, when I'm actually saying I want to come to you to soften the sidewalk requirements, I'm also saying on my end, I need to be more aggressive with grant funding to alleviate those gaps so that we can put them in. So while I'm actually doing one thing on one end that would potentially remove sidewalks being put in by developers, I'm also in the back of my mind exploring other options for us to be more aggressive as a town to get grant funding to put sidewalks in these areas, because the main point, especially with the congestion management plan, was pedestrian connectivity and things of that nature. So it's not that I'm abandoning pedestrian connectivity by alleviating these requirements on tenants, but I will do more aggressive approaches with grant funding. I think that creates the balance.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so they need to get their request for a variance.
Call
You
me
just
tomorrow.
have to talk.
I'll walk them through
Okay,
filing
right.
with the.
Okay,
It's workable.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, next on our list is Grilly Mitchell.
Wow, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna make this short, easy to the point. Just want to take this time out. Grilly Mitchell, 4056 William Bell Luther Drive. Just want to take this time, since this is our first meeting since we had all the activities with the Veteran Affairs Heroes Homecoming. Just want to say thanks to everyone. I had a list of names and everything, but I'm just thank to everybody, because thanks to you all and your support, it was a huge success. Everybody talked about what a fantastic time and how much they enjoyed it, and especially thanks to all the veterans that live inside our community and surrounding areas. Thank you all, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comments. Next on our consent agenda, item A is consideration of approval of the minutes from the October 1st, 2018 special meeting. Item B, consideration of approval of the minutes from the October 8th, 2018 regular meeting. Item C, designation of town manager to execute contracts for debris removal and monitoring based on return bid packages. Staff has selected vendors for debris removal and debris monitoring. Custom Tree Care Incorporated was the low bid for the debris removal, and Debris Tech was the low bidder for debris monitoring. All expenditures paid for debris removal and monitoring are reimbursable by FEMA. Consideration of resolution of support for the submission of the 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Grant, and also the consideration of authorization to receive $13,100 reimbursement from an interlocal agreement for mosquito abatement services, State of North Carolina, County of Cumberland. Are there any changes to our consent agenda, or do I have a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Have a motion to approve. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Next is under old business. We have Phase 2, Hope Mills Lake Park. Mr. Fleming's design for the kayak launch and access down the bulkhead, including a single access of steps and handicap accessible ramp with a hardened landing area. And Who do I turn this over to?
I'm gonna let Don Cisco, our Public Works Director,
Okay.
come up, and he's got the, well, he had the plans, but we don't need the plans. It's not, it should be. Loaded on there. Is it on there? Did we put it on there?
Tiffany does that.
Okay.
Okay. Madam Mayor, Board of Commissioners,
I don't think
Steve
that's
Fleming
it.
this past week had sent us his, what we thought was going to be the final drawings for the lake park. We found out recently that the ADA processes are being extended to the municipalities, where it started years ago with the federal government and had gone into the states. The states are now pushing ADA requirements down to the municipalities, and we have been tasked with developing an actual transition program to bring our town into compliance, into full compliance with ADA. So with that said, we had to go back, and with the set of drawings, we have to make a small change to it. And it's quite simply on the ramps. And we have the kayak area that would have a set of steps for access down to it. Well, because of the requirements to have equal accessibility for everybody, we're going to have to put a ramp there instead of the steps. One of the things that we are going to see if it is feasible, rather than having a ramp onto the kayak area and then a separate ramp into the middle of the swimming area, is if the topography will actually allow for it, we will do one landing with a ramp going to the kayak area and then come off the other side into the swimming area. But other than that, we've got the bulkhead. You've all had the details for the bulkhead and the change in the topography for the sloping.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
when I looked at this, it did not resemble what I thought we talked about at the meeting when we asked him to go back. As you said, there's no entrance near the kayak ramp, and how this big concrete thing got out in the middle of the lake, I have no idea. I don't remember us discussing that at all. We talked about handicap ramps and entranceways for people to get in and out of the lake. Is that all concrete out in the middle of the swimming area?
No, sir.
Well, it's hard to see on here,
That's
so-
a wooden ramp that is ADA compliant. We'll actually have two runs, and at the base of it in the water, we'll have a concrete landing area.
It's kind of hard to see on here exactly what it is.
Don, I'm sorry, do you want to get the large
I am.
plans and let's open them up?
Okay.
Because they're easier to see that, I guess up there somewhere.
If you don't
next-
mind, I would like to
yeah.
have them close by where I can take a quick look at them.
Yeah. Or you could use the
On the tripod, maybe?
tripod. Yeah, and pull it closer.
Okay.
Do we have any clips? Okay. Okay, Drew went to go get the clips, I think.
You see, this doesn't show us very much. The writing's so small you can't read.
Yeah.
This is
got the
your
clips.
access ramp into the swimming area. We also have to have equal access into the kayak.
Right.
What we're going to try to do is instead of, you've got your steps down there right now, we have to put a ramp to the kayak area so we have equal access for folks with disabilities. One of the reasons that we had put the ramp over here towards the center of the swimming area was because of the change in slope in the topography of the gazebo, because we have to change that and cut that embankment back. So we have to be mindful how close we cut to the gazebo. But if we can, what we're going to try to get Mr. Fleming to do is take this ramp and move it over here so that we only have one landing, and then bring a ramp down into the kayak area.
Everybody else need to see this, or can you read it good enough on your?
Well, it sounds like what I asked for on August 20th, that we approved that motion, that the handicap access would be as close to the kayak launch as possible.
Right.
So we were taken back a little bit when we found it in the middle of the swimming area.
Yeah, and then the concrete out here.
Okay. Now, that says concrete platform, but that is just where it shows your center line. That's only a note on the drawing. That's for this concrete platform. That's the landing platform right here. There's no concrete out in the water.
No. Yeah.
See, if you read that on here, it's not that,
See, it
you
says
can't
where it
read
says
that.
seal. But that's what that's for. That's your center line of your concrete platform. That shows your equidistance and your location of your existing swimming.
He's talking about moving this over here.
Yeah.
We're going to
That
try to
was
move
it,
that
Drew.
over there
That
so
was
that
it,
we can
Drew.
still get access
I
into the
believe.
swimming area on one side and access to the kayak launch on the other
So
side.
then we're gonna have another set of steps over here somewhere.
We can put another set of steps there if you'd like.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
So I went back through the minutes of April 16th, and at the 31-minute marker, he says, having a ramp in the middle of the swimming area would have to go out approximately 50 feet into the water. And he suggested that it needed to be on one end or the other end. And then Commissioner Bellflower says, well, I think that's the way the direction of the board wanted to go, was to have it down by the kayak launch. So when Jesse made his motion, he said the bulkhead and the kayak launch along the boat shoreline and the ramp to include erosion control and sloping of the grassy area. On August 20th, when he came back, Mike makes the motion to make the few edits for the handicap ramp where he deemed appropriate near the kayak launch and remove the platform out of the swimming area and give us the option of 1, 2, or no steps at all in the swimming area. And that's from the minutes. And this is not, and no disrespect to you at all. But I think if we're paying an engineer $50,000 and he's gonna make major changes, he should come back here and tell us why he's doing it. Because we're gonna be essentially the ones that have to raise our hand for the expenditure. But that's not what we at all said. I mean, you can go back and listen to it in the minutes. And it was very clear that we did not want handicapped accessibility in the middle of the swimming area. We wanted it so they could get out of their cars and be able to get into the swimming area. Yeah.
Madam
I'm
Mayor.
not shooting the
Yes, sir.
messenger.
Yes, sir.
I can pass that along.
Commissioner Bellflowers.
Okay. Don,
Sir.
can we approve the plans presented with those changes to get this to the bidding process?
I would
Can
prefer-
we approve these plans? The only thing we're moving is the platform to
the
the
ramp.
kayak launch, the ramp.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's the only thing we're moving. Everything else is the same. The sloping's the same. The construction of the bulkhead is the same. Everything is the same except the location of that ramp.
I would say that since the major structural issues that we have are actually the bulkhead
Yep,
and the sloping,
yep.
the ramp is an accessory facility, and it should be able to be moved anywhere. I would defer your question to our attorney as to whether we can do the contract or not, with the understanding that the ramp will be moved.
Because if that's true, Mayor, I'm gonna make the motion, we approve the plans. Dan?
With the edit.
With the edit. I'm gonna make the motion, we approve them.
I think you probably could, just so I'm understanding, the change that we're making is, like you said, it's not, it's an accessory, that we're just moving locations, really.
Yes.
So it's not gonna fundamentally alter the
No, sir.
nature of the work or anything like. I think we could probably do that then, if we approve it with that change, as long as we make that clear when we're doing the bid process. You could, that you're bidding on doing this with that amendment. Then if it's a minor amendment like that, you probably could do that.
Thank you, Dan. Mayor, that's my motion.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, before you do that, I would ask one more question, because you had mentioned steps. If we were going to do that, do you want a set of steps in the middle where the ramp's showing right now?
Blake's a long way down through there with no entrance at all, except jumping in.
I think under, Don, can I address that? Back on the 20th, Steve Fleming talked about steps. He said that there were some recommendations of some 8-foot steps, I think, that we're gonna walk down from the bulkhead actually into the swimming area. And when I first looked at these drawings, that's what I really thought that was. I thought that was a set of stairs that was gonna walk down. And then I saw that it was a ramp. And I knew then the ramp was in the wrong location. But your question back is, and I guess it would be to this board, do we wanna go with stairs? I think we should. So that would be, again, another accessory to the bulkhead.
Yes.
Okay, because we're not changing the bulkhead structure
No.
or the sloping.
No.
These are accessories that we would be approving with
Yes.
the drawings.
I can support that.
So I would include, yes, in my motion, I would include the stairs.
Copy that.
And what you could probably do is have them not necessarily have to redo the thing, but just alter the design with that minor revision, and then go ahead and approve that with that revision to open that up for bid.
Yeah,
The 2 revisions.
yeah.
The two, yeah.
Okay, so the motion is that we're approving this plan with 2 revisions. One is to make it ADA accessible and make the ramp and the kayak launch in that area, and then add steps where there currently is a ramp. Is that what I'm
In
hearing?
the kayak area, there's going to be 2 ramps.
Yeah.
There's going to be one ramp for the kayak
And one
and then
for the
another ramp
handicap accessible.
for the swimming area.
But
and
you want the steps in the center.
steps in the center.
That's what my question was, because
Yeah.
if you remember, the first time he brought it, he put steps on
He
either
did.
end.
He had two,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so steps in the center. All right, we have a motion to approve the plan with some revisions, and all
That's
the-
with handrails, Don.
Yes, sir.
The handicap,
It
the
has to be,
handicap
yeah.
one.
Well, I want to make sure.
Well, yes, sir.
I think it was required.
Yeah.
Want to make sure.
Okay.
Any
Okay.
other discussion? Anything, Ms. Adams?
No.
Okay. All right, all those in favor to approve this with those revisions as listed, raise your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Okay?
Thanks.
All right, next thing we have is new business, and this is a non-public hearing item, and this is case number 18-099. Consideration of the redevelopment of the Verizon Building, CP Site Plan Review, Hope Mills Zoning Ordinance, Zone CP. Acreage is 3.72 acres plus or minus, located at 3001 North Main Street, submitted by Lumina 3001 LLC owner and George M. Rose, engineer. And I'll turn it over to Mr. McLaughlin.
As stated by Mayor Warner, this is case 18099, site plan approval for Verizon Wireless. As you see on the aerial photograph, this development is located, it's the existing Verizon Wireless building at Camden and North Main. It's highlighted in white. This is the proposed site plan. I'll leave that up because it's something very specific I want to address, tied to some questions you guys raised with respect to the condition sheet, and specifically to DOT comments from the condition sheet. In terms of the background, the subject property is 3.72 acres, addressed as 3001 North Main Street. It's developed with an existing Verizon Wireless retail store with 455 feet of frontage along North Main Street, 440 feet of frontage along Camden. Direct access to the site is located off of Cannon Road, with existing cross-lateral access provided in the rear to an existing Dollar Tree store, also off of North Main. The site provides for a total of 69 parking spaces located in the front and western side of the development, and the existing Verizon building has an interior portion in the rear that was never built out. The applicant is proposing to add 3 separate retail spaces within this existing undeveloped rear interior portion of the building, and there is no external construction proposed with this request. If you go in your packets to page 2 or 4 of your condition sheet, there's a comment from DOT that states that the driveway permit may be required, but that the site plan is incomplete because it doesn't show Camden. What I talked specifically to Troy Baker, and what he's saying is if you look at this bottom portion of this site plan, you see the sidewalk and the curve for North Main Street, Highway 59. On the left side of the screen, all you see is the property line, and you see Camden called out. So DOT is literally specifically saying they need to see the curb line for Camden on this site plan. And they're not saying, they're not telling us to approve this request. They're saying as a part of our approval, their condition would be the requirement of a driveway permit. And he did specifically indicate that they're probably going to be heavy-handed on this with requiring them to install a turn lane. He didn't say if that turn lane was going to be on Main Street or Camden. I'm not sure. But what will ultimately happen is something that we already have in place, where we have a clause in our building code that speaks to local and state approvals. So in the event that you guys approve this tonight and they apply for building permits, Troy Baker has asked us to hold the final CO until they get their driveway permit from DOT, which we already do anyway. So there were some concerns about whether or not we should approve this based on this comment, and what I'm trying to point out is these conditions are conditions of approval of the zoning, but they're permit-related conditions that have to be complied with before you get your final CO, which is the same thing that Surge had an issue with. They got the zoning approval, but the sidewalks came as a condition, so their final CO was held until they worked something out. So even though you guys may lean forward with the approval for this, it doesn't mean you're approving their issues with DOT. It just means that they have to comply with DOT when they get their driveway permit, which would be a condition of them getting their final CO. But I wanted to highlight that in case some of you guys had that additional comment or concern.
Questions?
I do.
Okay.
Shoot.
There's absolutely no fallout that could potentially happen to the town. Like, every angle has been looked at, that when they tell them to put that turning lane in, that we lose the lateral access, or we end up having to do some driveway ourselves and it's going to be the town's expense, or
With my experience with DOT, they have full jurisdiction and full control over what they require as their, what they call road diet, based on their analysis of this intersection, and we have the control of holding all permits until they show compliance with DOT. But I'm not aware of a process with DOT as a part of their process can require us to do something tied to a private development. Now, we actually apply for the driveway permit for the golf course, then we're on the hook because that's us applying for it. But I can't anticipate anything that would eliminate that cross lateral access that is very useful, because you can turn in almost what Samuel's now and go all the way down to Verizon. That is classic lateral access. So I don't think DOT, I can't speak for Troy, but I would be shocked if they would push for them to sever that connection just for a turn lane. But we do have the authority to hold their feet to the fire with this condition that requires them to get a driveway permit. Now, DOT may come back and say, you know what, you're fine, driveway permit is not required. That's fine too, but we need something in writing on DOT letterhead that said that they met whatever DOT's requirements were, and that's what this comment puts them on the hook for requirement.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
That was my main question too, Chancellor, is that when I look at this site plan, I want to feel assurance that this site plan does not compromise the current cross-lateral access that's there right now. So how can I be sure, or how can this board be sure that this site plan will not compromise that?
Just from my analysis of this site, if you recall, the area along Main Street on this side of the site, there's a tremendous drop-off.
Right.
So I do not anticipate, from my analysis of it, DOT requiring any entrance off of that portion of the site.
Okay.
That portion of the site is also where your lateral access is. So with the current entrance to the site being here at the northern portion of the site off Camden, I think from my understanding of a conversation with Troy, that's where they're going to concentrate their requirements for a turn lane, which is what he spoke to. He didn't indicate to me that he was going to require anything that would jeopardize that cross access. And from my understanding, it's probably DOT that pushed for that cross access. Again, I can't speak for Troy, but I'd be really, really thrown off if, as a result of his analysis of this, his recommendation would be to sever cross-lateral access and leave the current access off of Camden. When he told me today, he was talking about turning lanes off of Camden. He didn't indicate anything that would give me the impression that he's going to recommend something that would sever that lateral access off of North Main.
Do you think that we should have the DOT recommendation on this site plan before we take action?
No, because the way site plan approvals work, these are draft conditions that are conditions of the approval.
Okay.
So we don't have the authority, or I'll put it this way, to be candid, no developer is going to approach DOT to get a driveway permit for a project that hadn't been approved.
Okay.
The project approval triggers the
okay.
DOT requirements as a condition of the approval. And then we have the system of checks and balances to make sure that they find, well, we can issue the building permit as a condition of this approval. But that final CO, just like with Surge, we will hold a line until we get all those local and state approvals. And if DOT is saying that whatever their diet is, if this is approved, we're going to put turn lanes on everywhere. If that's what they require, so long as I don't see it creating another issue, we actually hold that final CO until we get that approval. So I don't think that there's anything that tells us we don't still have control over. But with the way these projects move forward, I don't have the authority to require compliance with a permit-related condition before they get the zone approval that they're seeking today.
Okay. That's all I have, Mayor.
Any other questions? Action to be taken.
Can we approve the site plan with the condition that the lateral access will remain?
Technically, with site plan approval, I just have to throw this out there legally. With site plan approvals, the burden of proof is to determine if they are in compliance with existing current zoning regulations, which they are. I think legally, I do not think we have the authority to place a condition on a site plan approval. To get very technical with me, so I do not think we have the authority to do that.
I would ask Dan, is that correct? Okay.
Okay. What's the wishes of the board?
I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't, because they're already they're grandfathered in for that, not having to be required for the lateral access, but they have it right now. They already had it before we did the ordinance, so it's not like, and they're not doing any
it's not like they're
exterior
providing
changes, so
lateral
it's not
access.
going to
I'm
kick
just saying.
in. So if DOT ends up doing something, we could potentially lose that.
I'm just saying, I don't know if we got the photographs here, but
Would it be
it's
possible?
not practical from an engineering standpoint for them to introduce an entrance in
Yeah.
that area with the drop, and there's a huge retaining wall there, so I very seriously doubt.
Down on Camden Road.
Would it be?
This area here, this is a huge retaining wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where your lateral access
That's- yep.
starts.
Yeah.
So I very seriously doubt that DOT would do anything to
And-
introduce a new entrance
on
here
Camden Road.
when the entrance is here.
And could I suggest, and Chancellor, correct me if, this, but could I suggest possibly that we enter into a discussion with DOT that, just a discussion that, we're not putting a condition on this, but enter into a discussion with them that we would like for the lateral
The access
access
to
to remain.
Yeah.
And, I'm
Yeah,
sure
I-
DOT would not have an issue with that.
That's what I'm getting at too. DOT is primarily the entity that pushes for these cross
Right.
connections. So
Right.
just from my experience with Troy over the last 4 years, I'd be really shocked if he wanted to sever the existing connection when they just put the median out there and
Yeah.
push
And
for.
especially if they know we
Yeah.
want it to stay.
It's a PR thing too,
Yeah.
because of the medians.
Yeah.
Access
Madam
is
Mayor,
big.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if they block off that lateral access, it'd probably do them more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be hurting them more
It
than
would be
anyone
more.
else.
It would be more adverse.
Oh, yeah.
Than anything.
That
but
right
like
that right turn lane starts right about in there, don't it? Isn't there a right
talking about
turn?
off of Main,
Isn't there a right turn lane?
there are
Right
no
to
turn
left turn
lanes.
lane.
There's not a right turn lane right there?
Yeah,
You
there's a
talking about
right
right
turn lane.
on Camden
Right turn
Street
lane
or
right
on the
there,
Main
isn't it?
Street side?
Main Street to go to Camden.
Main Street, yes, Camden.
Off of Main Street, I mean.
Yeah, so Troy's talking about turning lanes off Camden.
Right, sure.
Yeah. So my point is the whole issue with severing the access off of this along Main Street. I just don't think that's practical. When the conversation I had with him was about turning lanes on.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion
Okay.
to approve redevelopment of the Verizon Building CP site plan review, Hope Mill zoning ordinance zone CP acreage 3.72 acres plus or minus located on 3001 North Main Street, NC Highway 59, submitted by Luma LLC owner and George M. Rose engineer.
Okay, I have a motion. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Thank you, sir.
All right, that's it for me.
Okay, the next item of discussion is discussion and consideration to commission an external investigation into the allegations of ethical misconduct by members of the Town of Hope Mills Town Board of Commissioners, Mayor and Commissioners, and town staff pertaining to various sections of the town's Code of Ethics and Conduct for town officials, and allegations of inappropriate protocols used by all parties during the decision-making process regarding all official correspondence and offers to purchase or lease municipal property presented or submitted by the Lone Survivor Foundation to the Town of Hope Mills during the period of December 1st, 2017 to November 6, 2018, and this was requested by Commissioner Bellflowers, and I will turn this over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make the motion to commission an external investigation into 1, allegations of ethical misconduct by members of the Town of Hope Mills Town Board of Commissioners, that includes the mayor and commissioners, and town staff pertaining to various sections of the town Code of Ethics and Conduct for town officials, and 2, allegations of inappropriate protocols used by all parties during the decision-making process regarding all official correspondence and offers to purchase, lease municipal property presented or submitted by the Lone Survivor Foundation, LSF, to the town of Hope Mills during the period of December 1st, 2017 to November 6th, 2018. Also included in this motion is to direct our town attorney to contact the North Carolina League of Municipalities to conduct the investigation and report back to the town board during the next regular town board meeting on December 17th that they'll do it and with cost estimates. And if not, a list of other investigators that would be willing to do it along with their cost estimates. And Mayor, this is my motion.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. With our attorney, is it appropriate for you to check and see if you can get this to take place? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have discussion and consideration regarding a resolution requesting introduction of a local bill to amend the charter to allow for recall elections as requested by Commissioner Bellflowers. And this was one of those things that had been tabled previously, so we bring it back up. And Commissioner Bellflowers, do you have conversation about this?
Well, we tabled this from our April 16th meeting, Mayor. And since the 4-year term election has been resolved, I wanted to bring it back up for consideration while the General Assembly still is in session. As you can tell, there's a resolution that's been put forward with it, and if approved by the board, would be submitted. Additionally, there was copies of other recall mechanisms that were in place from other municipalities, and most recently, the city of Fayetteville adopted their ordinance, a resolution for recall. If you look in the resolution, it says that there'd be 15% of registered voters in Hope Mills. I called Board of Elections today, and they sent me a copy of the number of registered voters in Hope Mills as of December 2nd, 2018, and that number is 11,292. Of those, the recall provisions would be that 15% of those would actually petition for a ballot for a recall of elected officials, which would be 1,694. And that's a pretty high threshold because I don't believe we have that many people that vote in any of the municipal elections in the past. So it's 15% that would actually sign a petition for a recall of an elected official. So that's why I brought it up April 16th. We tabled it, and I'm bringing it back up again tonight, asking the board to approve the resolution so we can send it forward while the General Assembly is still in session. So my motion is to approve a resolution requesting introduction of a local bill to amend the charter to allow for recall elections.
Okay, is there discussion? Okay, then do we need to do any more than that, Attorney?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Have you all voted?
No, we haven't voted. I was just asking you if there's anything more needed to what he has in reference to the language of what's here.
I would have to check in with the Board of Elections to determine exactly what procedures we need to follow, but I believe it is, the gist of it is we make a request to the General Assembly for special legislation.
Okay.
Correct,
Commissioner
by the
Larson, do you have a
resolution.
question?
Well, a statement. I'm not necessarily against a recall. I have a difficult time comparing Durham and Greensboro and Fayetteville with Hope Mills at 17,000 and then 300 plus, and they have staggered terms, they have districts. I mean, we're just set up completely different. I'm not saying I'm not willing to look at it in the future, or even in January when they reassemble, if it is January, or it might be the 1st of February.
It's January, but they're actually in session now.
They are.
Right. Yeah. But I have a hard time making those comparisons between those municipalities, those cities, and Hope Mills. And what is the price of this? How much does it cost to have a? Does anybody have a cost for it?
That's determined by the Board of Elections. Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I would have proposed this on the November 19th meeting, but we didn't have one. And I proposed this back on April 16th. And to me, it doesn't matter what size of population of the municipality. It's the spirit of holding elected officials accountable for their actions and giving the voters an option. They voted for us, they put us here in the beginning, and the recall mechanism is for voters that if we're not doing the standards of what we said we would do by the oath of office, it's their opportunity to petition for a recall of us. That's the spirit. It doesn't matter whether you got 20,000 or 200,000. The same spirit is the same.
I don't disagree with you on that.
And the General Assembly is in session now, and that's why a number of municipalities, not only Fayetteville, when I was at the League's meeting this past week, there were other municipalities doing the same thing. And it takes legislation to approve them. But if we don't do it, I'd like to know why not. That's all
Well, for
I'm
me,
gonna
it
say.
was just a matter of time to do research for January. I mean, they'll be back in session. It's not, you're changing your charter. It's not just a simple thing. I mean, it's a major deal to change your charter. And I think that why wouldn't we want to look into see what municipalities that are under 100,000 are doing? That's just my opinion. Doesn't mean I'm against it. I'm just saying I think it requires a little more thought into it, and also how much does it cost?
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yes, sir.
What triggers a recall response? What does the person have to do to get recalled? But we had a lady stand here tonight and tell us none of us have done nothing. Does that mean we're all recalled?
No.
Okay.
She's just stating her opinion.
What triggers that
It's in
recall?
this.
It's in the resolution.
It's in the resolution. It says a recall would allow its citizens an opportunity to address any serious concerns that may arise between regular city elections in regard to allegations of malfeasance, nonfeasance, or violation of the oath of office. And a recall petition committee, as authorized in the recall provision, shall be comprised of at least 5 members who are registered voters within the city and who shall represent the signers of the petition. And the committee shall be responsible for filing an affidavit, circulating the petition, and for assembling and returning the petition to the Board of Elections. And then it goes on down to tell you about filing it, and then after the recall petition is filed, what happens next. So there's a whole list of things. I mean, it's actually detailed. And then if after that recall election, enough people don't vote to have that person removed, then for the following, they stay in office for the remainder of their unexpired term. And then it goes on to detail that then you can't call for a petition, can't be filed against an official during the first 3 months of the term of office or during the 6 months before the expiration of the term of that office. So basically, you got 9 months of a 2-year term, which would be 3 months at the beginning and 6 months at the end, that you can't ask for a recall.
pretty short window.
I read all that this afternoon, but these people out here don't have that in front of them.
It would have been in their,
It's in their packet.
It would have been
If
if they
they
got
And on the
have a
agenda.
website.
packet, you have a packet?
It would be on their agenda site if they got the agenda.
That's the reason I asked that question.
Yeah.
It's a well-packaged resolution. It truly is.
I stated earlier I would support it if we went to the 4-year terms, because that's a lot longer time frame. And when you talk about the majority of municipalities, that's what the majority of municipalities have gone to, is the 4-year term. And that's why the majority of municipalities have gone to this recall election. Just saying.
So we have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? So all those in favor of presenting this to follow the steps to present it to their legislature, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? So it's a 3-2, so it won't go anywhere. Okay? Next thing on our list is a discussion and consideration to schedule a walkthrough viewing of the Hope Mills Episcopal Church Parsonage House with members of the town board, town staff, and Historic Preservation Commission in order to determine current condition of the building structure. So when would be a good time? You have some dates, Ms. Adams?
And, well, you've got a December calendar and a January calendar
Okay.
in your packet for scheduling purposes. And just keep in mind, we've already got a special meeting on January the 14th at 7 p.m.
I just had some questions from being the liaison for the Historical Preservation Commission. Well, a number of things. I don't know about jurisdiction anymore since they are a commission and we are a commission. At what point does their powers supersede ours as a commission? When you're talking about preservation or destruction of a historical building, I thought we empowered them to make those decisions, not us. That's one item. We were also told that we couldn't store items down there because the mold was so bad. So that would be a safety concern. These are some things I'm getting back from the commission. Some questions ahead.
As to the first one, I guess, is there an appeal process that we have in place from a decision made by the Historic Commission?
Chancellor, has the commission, are they up and running with approving
The adoption of the
ordinance
ordinance and everything, they are a fully operational commission. It's just that we hadn't had
we haven't had any
a
cases?
certificate of occupancy had been filed. But what Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell was saying is that I think up until that point, this board served as the commission until the committee became the commission. And now that they are a fully operational commission. So if we're talking about the decision to demolish or do something to the historical building, I think that commission does have jurisdictional authority.
But they've already taken consensus and want the building to be raised, and any materials that could be repurposed with hopefully a future
Yeah.
type building put there for public restrooms and
Now,
a small meeting room or something.
Now, what I will say that makes this a little unique, from my interpretation, Dan, you can chime in on this too. The Historic Commission comes into play when someone files for an application to do something to the exterior of an exterior building. If we own that building, I don't know where it crosses where it's our building, but they're the commission that's established in this town. So that's where it gets a
Yes,
little fuzzy for me.
we would sort of be the applicant. I assume, if the Historic District Commission makes a determination and the applicant disagrees with that decision, do they appeal to the Board of Adjustment, or do we have a process?
I have to research that.
Okay, I know some Historic District Commissions have an appeal process that goes to the Board of Adjustment, and then it goes to Superior Court after
I
that.
think what Dan said is correct, which makes it more complicated because
Does
the
y'all
Board of
do-
Adjustment
yeah.
is.
We would have a conflict, I would think, on that.
I'm not exactly sure how that would work. It may just skip right to Superior Court in that situation, assuming the Board of Adjustment agreed with y'all.
You need some time
Or
to,
the Board of Adjustment.
Dan, you need some time to research that, or?
I will have to, if that issue comes up, if there is something where it's a town-owned building that the Historic District Commission makes a decision that the town board disagrees with, what is the process for appeal on that, given that the Board of Adjustment is made up of the town board? That does present kind of a tricky little issue. I will have to research that particular issue. I think for any non-town owned property, that would be the proper process. Is Historic District Commission makes a decision. If they're aggrieved, they appeal to the Board of Adjustment. And then from there, the process would go to Superior Court. But if the town is the applicant, then that does complicate things, and I'll need to look at that.
Have we distributed that information to those people that are in the historic district, that they now are under a historic commission before they do anything to their building?
From my understanding of the general statute, when we adopted the actual historic ordinance, that's what gave the commission the authority. And what I've gotten from the state historic preservation commission is that because that was a public hearing, that was the notification. I think we have had conversations at the committee level of whether or not we wanted to maybe have some type of session to inform the public. But
'Cause
the
there's been-
official
yeah.
legal answer is that technically the general public was notified when we had the public hearing to adopt the ordinance.
So to enforce this, if they live in the historic district, or if they own a building in the historic district and they've already making changes currently, and they haven't requested permission to do that or to follow the guidelines established, then the enforcement comes from the commission or from,
Technically, the way this would come into play is it would trigger the county. So what happens is when someone applies for a building permit to do,
but they don't apply necessarily to do the cosmetic changes.
the historic district only comes in if they're doing exterior changes. So if they're doing exterior changes, my philosophy is that would trigger a site plan approval from the county.
Well, not paint and awnings and
Yeah,
those
but-
kinds, so those kinds of things aren't included? Because my understanding was when they were working on it that, to get away from having somebody paint their building, bright pink, or to add a metal structure to the side of the building. I mean, there was
Change
things like that
windows,
to
yeah.
change the way that it looks, even though you wouldn't come get a building permit for that. That was one of the things I'm wondering if the people that own these buildings actually understand or know what this means. Otherwise, I think you're already seeing some things change, and that's my question. I don't know.
I'm not aware, are you aware of some projects that have?
They're not going to be obvious. It's going to be those simple things like I'm painting my exterior walls, something.
Now we would have to cross-reference that with the general standards that we did put in place, because we did adopt the general standards that the state tells us to adopt in the event that we want to go generic. I don't have those regulations memorized, but I do know there is a certain threshold of changes that do not require the approval of the commission. I'm not sure if those generic standards went to the point of including paint.
Okay.
But I do know that my general feel of historic districts is that when you're making exterior changes, and that is typically when you're adding to, changing out windows and things of that nature, I'm not sure if just painting a building rises to that level without cross-reference that with the generic standards that they did adopt.
Yeah.
And under that scenario, anything that triggers a permit or a site plan approval is supposed to trigger these requirements to receive a certificate of appropriateness, which is what you would only get from the Historic Commission.
Okay.
But I understand your point, is there's a gap in what some people feel that I can just go out and pay my building.
And then as far as the structures, not the upkeep of the structures and the enforcing of the code of making sure the buildings aren't becoming dilapidated or they're sitting, if you look at our business district or if you look at Ellison Street, I just use those two as an example. Is there not now meat to that commission that they can, there's some type of
Approval process.
yeah, in other words, we can say we want this to look better because this is in the historical district. That was what my understanding was. It was also possible with us having a commission.
I think the way that played out, from my understanding, when I got on the commission, they were very, very concerned with getting the historic district adopted, which is why we went with the generic standards from the state, and the extra stuff where we would really, really tailor it to some very specific things would require us to hire, I think that's in the ordinance too, hire a consultant, and this is historic experience that would allow us to draft conditions. But that typically takes about a year and a half, so we move forward with the generic condition to preserve the district and to create the commission, with the next plan of action being to get that specifically narrowly tailored list of draft guidelines in place. And I think that may be where we could actually put in certain, I don't know if us having
I
them-
believe Lisa Waring had spoken to someone, and they actually helped draft those ordinances for historic areas, don't they?
It's the state generic that we're talking about.
Oh, not the ones that are more detailed?
If you want more detail, that's when you have to you have to commission a consultant to come in and draft them. I'm just saying that process takes a significant amount of time, so we didn't want to wait until that was done to get the ordinance adopted, so they can go ahead and get the commission started.
Yeah, and they have not done
And
that.
they hadn't done that.
We can still amend
So
later.
the only standards we have in place are the generic ones from the state, until we do get that specific narrative.
Okay, so
We're
back
still
to
looking
the,
through a walkthrough date.
well, that's what I'm saying, back to the original request. I think we're taking off from that because of the fact that what I'm hearing is that we don't have the authority to go through there, and because the historical commission should be the one to do that. That's what I'm thinking I'm hearing. So
Yeah.
is the general consensus that we want to set this up, and we'll share the time with the Historic Preservation Commission and town staff to do this walkthrough. I guess that we could decide, let them help us with the decision of where we're going with this.
When do they meet again, Mike?
This week.
They meet-
No,
Yeah.
not this, well,
It's,
this week?
It's,
It's the second.
it's the 12th, isn't it?
Yeah, the
The
second
12th.
Wednesday
Yeah.
of the month.
Next Wednesday. Wednesday.
Bi-monthly, yeah.
The 12th.
You want to do it during a meeting with them? I don't know, they meet in January as well?
As long as we got notification, I guess. As long as we got notification.
I can check
We
that.
can't just show up.
Well, no,
All you
I
need is
mean-
a 48-hour
Okay, so
notification
December
of a
12th, is there a meeting?
notice of a quorum that you're having a special, special meeting for the walkthrough.
But is it safe, is the mold, are there mold spores or?
The mold, Ray. Is it safe to go in there? Or would it be safe for them to go in there? Could they have masks on or what?
Don and I went in there with no mask.
So, yeah.
They were told not to store anything down there because of the
Yeah, I
mold.
wouldn't store the historic papers and things.
Look what happened to him.
Yeah, I mean.
There's a lot more in it than an issue to walk through a year and a half ago or so. And
Since the hurricane, it's gotten worse.
yes,
Yeah.
there's a lot of mold
There's been
Now,
damage since the
There's
hurricane.
a lot of leaks
as well.
because of a roof that needs to be replaced. The termite damage did not just go through the floor like the initial paperwork said. Public Works had went over there and they removed some around the chimney. Termite damage extends up the walls around the chimney. That's why the roof is sagging around the chimney because the walls. The only thing holding it together basically is probably that siding up there. It's very dilapidated.
So where are we with the plan to tear it down? I think Mayor Pro Tem said they had said tear it down.
Well, I've heard conflicting things that they don't want it torn down, so.
Miss Warren can confirm that. I think she's secretary, but that's my understanding is they made a recommendation to have it raised, but to repurpose any materials possible.
Yeah. If it has to be,
If
is
it
what
has
she's
to be.
saying.
But also to
Yeah.
be replaced at some point
Mhm.
with public
So that's a- yeah,
restrooms,
that's a
small meeting
budgetary
room,
A budgetary matter.
maybe,
Yeah.
something aesthetically pleasing.
And tearing it down is a budgetary matter too. We don't have money budgeted for that this year, but, I mean.
Purpose
we
of the
can
walkthrough
come
would be
up with
to
it.
determine the if.
If you let it fall down, we can claim a disaster.
Don't you think? The walkthrough would determine the if
Yeah.
it needs to be turned?
Yeah,
That's the spirit behind it. That's
Right,
why I
so-
requested
And the
it.
gas station just freed up 2 demolitions. If
Yeah.
if the if is there. that
Yeah.
It needs to be torn
So
down.
you want to try is December 12th workable?
And we have our regular meeting at 5. Lisa, do you know if there's much on that agenda? Okay.
So would you want to meet
6.
there at 5 or meet there? Well, is the power on in the building?
I don't,
I don't think so.
no, there's no
So
power.
we need to be
but-
there before dark.
Before
So-
dark.
Yeah.
Why don't we just have them see if it's okay if we go there on the 13th? And we can go in the afternoon on the 13th.
If they can go
If,
though.
if they approve of us going on our own, without them. Unless they want to go.
We had to
there's
do
doubts in-
Had to do public notice of quorum.
Yeah. If there's doubts in their mind.
Yeah, we could do that with a
Yeah.
48-hour notice,
But
yeah.
don't you think if there's
Yeah.
doubts in their mind, they're gonna have to be there to help eliminate the doubt?
I think a joint walkthrough would determine the if. That's why I recommended. Staff, board, and the commission. That's why I recommended, all three.
But I understand there's no electricity there,
We'll have to come early.
and we'd have to be early.
Yeah,
How
I know-
early do you think?
I
5
know
o'clock at
Miss
Hope
Hall's been
Mills is
sick, you
busy.
know.
yeah.
4? Would it be possible to meet at 4?
Doesn't matter to me.
I don't know if Chairman Hall can meet. We'd have to check with her. She's been kind of sick this past month.
We always got January. I mean, you don't have to look at December. We can go into January if you want.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be
we in a-
plenty of notice then.
yeah.
I will tell you that I had been asked about the safety issue with the building.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Gray, James Gray, who does home repairs and work, is the person that contacted me because he says the roof is leaking and that he's afraid it's going to fall in. Now, as far as I know, there's nobody going in and out of that building,
No.
but I'm just wondering, are we at that stage where we don't need to wait any longer if we're going to do some kind of action before we do have a bigger liability? That was my only thinking, Commissioner Bellflower's about going, if we want to make some kind of decisions in conjunction with staff and the commission, to go ahead and look at that. Especially if we've saved some money if we budgeted money for those other homes, and I think
Yeah,
we
could
did.
use it for this, yeah.
Well, as I say, because we're meeting on the 12th. If I met with the Historical Preservation Commission on the 12th, we have a next meeting on the 17th here. We could poll our members and see what would be a convenient time sometime in January,
Okay,
and then coordinate that with you guys.
yep,
Would that be better?
we could do that.
Maybe. So
Is
I
that-
think Jody works on Fort Bragg. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um,
If that's good with Commissioner Bellflower's.
Would that be
What was it
okay?
again, Mike?
Won't you let us have our meeting on the 12th? I'll poll the members, and I'll come back to you on the 17th
That's good.
here with a date, a proposed date in January, or a couple dates maybe in January, that we can tour the site.
Yeah.
And make some, another workshop kind of thing.
And that's why I just wanted to open the dialogue, the
Okay.
discussion. And that was the main purpose of putting it on the agenda, was just to open up the dialogue about,
Sure.
Yeah.
you know, about everybody going in together and
Just-
clearing up the if.
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
recall, we've added already another meeting date in January. January 14th was added.
Because, I mean, you know, we're going to be looking at retreats and budget workshops soon. And this is something we kind of need to address now while we have the opportunity. Now, the other question would be, and I'm just going to ask this, is the public invited?
It'd be a public meeting.
Is the
It's
public?
a public, it would be a public meeting. We couldn't keep anybody that
Okay,
wanted
so
to attend out.
Might want to
So if
go in
somebody-
there and shift, so.
If somebody from the community wanted to attend the tour, then they would be allowed.
Correct.
Okay.
Just do the
Just
same
wanted to make
sort of
sure.
Have
Just
masks
like the
about.
walking,
Caveat,
just like
Yeah.
our walking tour of the properties.
bring a
Yeah.
mask.
Take turns.
Bring your own suit,
Everybody
mask.
bring a mask.
Yeah.
Come
Get 'em
at your
from-
own risk,
Get them from Don Cisco. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
I guess.
So I'll come back to you guys on the 17th, and
Okay.
with some couple dates and times.
Okay,
We could do the joint thing.
Next.
all right.
Thank you.
So much for that. Now we're down to manager's report.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor,
You're welcome.
Board of Commissioners. I have just a little bit. Hopefully, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. I know it's getting late. On Thursday, November the 29th, I met with Cumberland County Manager Amy Cannon and Assistant County Manager Tracy Jackson regarding discussions of combining Parks and Recreation resources with Cumberland County. They have asked that I send them some of our Parks and Rec budgetary and financial information for their review. Specifically, they want a breakout of what our athletics and what our special events cost roughly. So they both suggested another meeting to include myself and Michael Gibson, the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Fayetteville, prior to having a representative attend any joint meeting with the Board of Commissioners and Parks and Recreation Committee. They have asked for more direction concerning the programs and events that the town would like to have the county take over responsibility for, and the programs and events that the town would like to continue to be responsible for. And initially, in just the discussion last week with them, there was a very strong indication from Ms. Cannon that they would not want to take over events such as the July 4th parade, the Christmas parade, special events that we've had down at the lake, Old Mill Day, the food truck rodeos, things like that. They would not, they don't consider those parks and recreational events that they would cover. So just to give you a little information on that. So we are going to try to have another meeting. It's probably going to be after the holidays, just so you know, because of their time constraints. So I'll continue with the rest of my
And the Parks and Rec Committee will be advised, updated.
Oh, yes, yes, yep. I wanted to give you all this update first, and then I'll pass this along to the Parks and Rec Committee, and as we move through the process, we'll keep them up to date. And then when we do decide, because it's going to be up to them when they are comfortable with coming to us with a joint meeting, we'll certainly let both you and the board and the Parks and Rec Committee know of that. We'll get a couple of dates where they'll be able to come. So, continuing on with my report, the Johnson Street sidewalk Right now, 65% plans have been reviewed by NCDOT. Red line changes to be forwarded to McGill Engineering to implement changes in the 90% drawings. We are waiting on document review by the State Historic Preservation Office. First engineering reimbursement has been approved by NCDOT, and we are waiting on those funds. Rockfish Road Sidewalk, McGill Engineering, and NCDOT are coordinating final approval of the field changes. Start date to be determined. Contractor has submitted invoice for initial mobilization, material, sedimentation, and erosion control and traffic control. The new museum location. Public Works staff is continuing to remove the ceiling stippling as time allows. Parks and Rec building repairs. The leaking and damaged fire sprinkler system section has been identified and repaired. Roof drain leak identified and has been repaired. The heating and air ductwork replacement should be completed by the end of this week. Once that work has been completed, there will be some sheetrock that will need to be replaced and new carpet will be installed. The 2017-2018 audit report has been approved by the Local Government Commission. The auditors will be attending the December 17th regular meeting to present the audit to the Board of Commissioners. The Audit Finance Committee will meet prior to that meeting on the 17th at either 5:30 or 6 p.m. A FEMA scoping meeting was held on November 28th. We are set up to begin sending in reimbursement requests for any Hurricane Florence expenses to date. And as you know, the town was notified by the Cumberland County Public Health Department that we will receive reimbursement of $13,100 for the extra mosquito spraying due to Hurricane Florence. The board approved the reimbursement interlocal agreement under the consent agenda tonight. The eel ladder repair. The contractor is scheduling assessment for repairs. This cost will be FEMA reimbursable. This is not something that ASI was responsible for. Dam survey. Schnabel Engineering subcontractor has completed the first dam structure survey. Golf course. Public Works staff has begun removing hanging tree branches and downed trees. We will be doing as much of the required repair work as possible in-house. Public Works staff will be utilized to repair cart paths and spray herbicides. One cart path will require installation of a drain line. We have a tentative December 10th meeting date with McAdams Group to discuss parking and driveway access. Staff has completed the DOT NCID driveway application for access and automated application when we're ready. The proposed Gary Dove Memorial Building, the design for the signage has been received from Duneland Signs for assessment. We will be coordinating with the family and scheduling an unveiling within the next few weeks. Public Works has been through the town 2 times for vegetative and construction and demolition debris from Hurricane Florence. The contract is set up for the contractor to make one more pass-through and remove debris from the golf course. A final date for pickup will be established following the execution of the contract. The property donated by Ms. Brenda Jernigan. We have scheduled a survey and an appraisal, and a real estate attorney has been engaged to transfer title to the town before December 31st. Contact has been made with DOT concerning the flooding and drainage issues on Rockfish Road. They have indicated that they will be conducting a study in that area. We are continuing discussions with them concerning the flooding issues. The Christmas Parade and Festival of Lights. I understand that we have been receiving some negative comments concerning having the parade with the rain and not canceling. And a press release was issued today in response to those comments on social media. And I'd like to read that into the record. We would like to thank everyone that played a part in our 2018 Town Christmas Parade and festivities by way of spectator, participant, walker, rider, volunteers, and staff. For an event of this size, there are a lot of pieces, most of which the general public are not made aware of. For example, road closures are permitted through a required Department of Transportation ordinance, of which is required 2 months in advance. Also, the availability of volunteers, police department, fire department, they all play a major role in implementing an event of this magnitude. Given the weather and situations at hand, the best decisions possible were made in agreement between the town administration and the Parks and Recreation staff. We are thankful to those that came out in full force Christmas spirit, and we apologize to those that were not able to attend because of limitations created by the inclement weather. We ask for the public's understanding in this matter. Thank you very much.
I'll reiterate that I polled our board, and we fully support our staff and team in that decision.
And I think the Friday night event was spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
The parade was spectacular considering the circumstances. And I really have to commend the public work, the Parks and Rec and Public Works. Everybody pulled together, you know, to make it happen. Police, fire. I mean, it was, I don't want to say it was seamless, but, you know, for Parks and Rec, the people that put everything together, not having the experience in doing one before, they knew nothing about what was happening. And I think they did an outstanding job, and they deserve to be commended for it. I really do. And Friday night's event was, I've heard so many positive things, and I think our future, the Santa Claus will arrive on the boat from now on. So, because that was like, you know, 100% the best thing that I've heard that night. So, but
That's how
yes,
he
I
used-
do want to.
That's how he used to get here.
I've heard that. But I do want to thank Maxie very much and your staff, you know, for putting everything together the way that you, and all the volunteers that it took. You know, it was numerous volunteers, both CERT teams, members of the fire department, members of the police department, and members of the Public Works, and they just, you know, they did a good job. We all worked together and we got it done. So.
And I'd like to compliment Freedom Christian Academy's band for coming, and also Jack Britt's ROTC.
Yes.
In full
And the
dress
cheerleaders.
uniform.
They
They marched, they
cheerleaders.
walked the entire parade route.
Yep.
And I just think that's, you know, for me,
I agree.
that part of the parade too. Our staff did an outstanding job, but then those that came out that really
Yep.
were excited to be a part of it.
Yep.
And the pictures that have been posted and the pictures that we've received all along the parade route.
Oh, yeah. It was
There were a lot of
fabulous.
people out there, even though it was raining.
Yep.
Okay. Next, we have coming up, we have Breakfast with Santa on December 15th at 8:30 to 11. It'll be at the fire station. I think that's going to be a neat twist.
Exciting.
The Mayor's Youth Leadership Committee will meet December 17th at 6. And that group we met this evening. The next meeting we have is December 17th at 7. And then Christmas holiday town offices will be closed December 24th, 25th, and 26th. Next, we have liaisons update. First will be Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell with Historic Preservation Commission.
Yeah, for some reason, the meeting didn't get on here for the reminders, but they are meeting on
Yeah.
December the 12th at
It's
5
December
o'clock.
the 12th. Yep.
And,
Sorry about that.
That's going to be at Town Hall, I believe.
It will be, since
In here,
Parks and Rec
probably.
is still unavailable.
Or is it in here or in the front conference room? Front conference room. Okay. And then they also asked, we didn't have a meeting in November, but they asked Mayor if you'd like to come and speak about the parish hall.
Okay. I'll do it.
Okay. That's all I had for that.
Next is Commissioner Edwards and Lake Advisory Committee.
I was out of town when they had it, but I don't know if they had their meeting or not. I didn't hear anything about it. Last I heard, they had postponed it. So, do you know, Ms. Waring, if they did? Oh, you were there?
They didn't have a quorum.
Oh, you did have a quorum?
They did
No.
not.
Oh, you did not, okay.
Okay, so
No.
They did
postponed.
not.
No quorum. Okay, next we have Commissioner Legg. He has two committees, the Appearance Committee and the Festival Committee.
Well, the appearance committee met last Tuesday night, about 45 minutes after I arrived back in town. I was pushing it to get there. They had discussed the things that they participated in this weekend, like making up the stuff for the hot chocolate and cookies and everything for the parade. And they're taking applications or nominations for Yard of the Month for the, I guess, the next board meeting, is it? And the other committee just met tonight, so they're trying to get some stuff together with changing around to some members of the board and trying to find out what they can do, what they can't do, and what their requirements might be. But they're moving forward and are looking forward to May. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Larson, Parks and Rec.
We discussed the bylaws, which Pro Tem Mitchell has a copy of the old ones. So if you don't mind, if you could scan them and I mean, you could email them to me or just to Jane, I guess. Either way, you know, no sense in sending it to me, I guess. Just to Jane. They talked about Heritage Park, what they could do to help with Heritage Park, and where we were on the museum. And we talked a little bit about what's going to happen with, you know, their concerns about partnering with the county, which I was able to talk to you before you actually met with Amy, so that was good. And that they would like to be included in, you know, joint meeting.
Okay, Commissioner Bellflowers and Veterans and RULAC.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Veterans Committee does not meet in November or December, so our next meeting will kick up in January. However, RULAC met on Thursday, November 15th at the Hilltop on Fort Bragg Road. And finally, the Fort Bragg Joint Land Use Study is complete after 2 long years. This is how thick it is, of work that went into that. It was also a Fort Bragg construction update, which was huge. In fact, a lot of those comments were in the FO, and I think that was one of Drew's last articles before leaving. I think, Roger, that was one of his last articles before leaving. Drew, yeah, that left, and it was an excellent article about all the construction. They approved this study. They also approved a new slate of officers for next year and the minutes from the August 16th meeting, approved the financial report, and approved the next meeting in February. And I'll hand this big report to the town manager.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
And lastly, last Thursday, I got the opportunity to represent Hope Mills at the North Carolina League of Municipalities meeting at the Convention Center to discuss the Millennium Advocacy Goals for the 2019-2020 year. And it was always an opportunity to be in the room with what I consider the backbone of our great state, and that's the city and municipality leaders. It really is. It's an opportunity. I sat at a table with folks from Cary and Wilson. Who else was in there? Waynesboro. And just listening to other municipalities and managers and elected officials, it was really refreshing. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Staff comments?
No, ma'am.
No?
Nothing, Madam Mayor.
Okay, official comments?
I'll just say real quick, the mayor issued 2 proclamations to the Fort Bragg 10-miler teams. They went to Washington D.C. They finished, the women finished first for like the 8th time in the last 13 years. And the men finished second, and they finished the top a lot as well. They were very appreciative. Ted Moan was there from City of Fayetteville, and the mayor of Spring Lake was there as well, making a presentation. They really appreciated it. They said they might try to do that every year from now on. So appreciate doing that. Appreciate Drew putting that package together. I know there's a lot of time and effort put into that with the bond information, and we can look at that with the finance committee and see what's appropriate going into the future at some point, whether it be whatever debt financing or bond issuances or otherwise. That's all I had.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to say thank you to the staff, the Parks and Rec group. All you guys have worked so hard, especially with the holidays coming up. I really appreciate everything. Maxie, super proud of the job that you're doing. Super proud. The people that you got working with you are great people. That's all I'll say for now. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do I get started?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir?
I want to thank all the folks that came here tonight and spoke with their concerns. And I also like to thank all of our first responders for the Saturday and Sunday, because, I mean, that weather definitely had some concerns, some safety concerns, and you guys managed it first class. And Maxie, it just goes to show you how much hidden talent is in that department. And it showcased not only once, but twice this weekend. And we have that talent here. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have a motion?
I reckon so.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, make a motion to consult with town attorney pursuant to the attorney-client privilege, General Statute 143-318.11A3, discussion of existing litigation, John D. Pone Jr. versus the town of Hope Mills.
Okay, I have a motion. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed, we'll go directly to the back conference room, and we'll be back quickly.
Madam Mayor, I got a motion, move to seal the minutes of the closed session until such time as the release of the information would no longer frustrate the purpose of the closed session, and further, no action was taken.
I have a motion. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed,
Motion go
I
home.
have a motion to adjourn.
For real.
McDonald's.
Okay.
Okay. Yep, there's my keys. You're all set. Glad we got the.
Beating you, huh?
Yeah, that's what I was talking to Don about. That's why Don and I were going back over
Okay.
the schematic again.